Hero, captain of the Imperial Knights. Titles, a bride and an impeccable reputation. But it all fell apart. They betrayed his trust and he just left, without unnecessary drama. Now he is a hunter. The dungeons are his home, monsters are weaklings, the whole world is just the beginning. This is what he always dreamed of. He is free and now the world has only one question. Who will stop him? Let's find out. The story began in the second dungeon of the Rosebell Kingdom. Monsters began to attack the knights, but Ash ran up to them and struck one enemy by stabbing his sword into his body. Suddenly, a monster appeared behind him, but then Bale came to the rescue and stabbed his sharp sword into the enemy's body. He looked at Ash and told him not to let his guard down. The protagonist thanked him and they continued to fight the monsters. Bale asked how he liked his hunter skills. Ash replied that it was pretty good. A crowd of knights watched what was happening and wondered if they could handle it together. Wow, what strength. When they finished the battle, the guy looked at the monster and asked if he moved as well as Bale's commander. Who is he? The knight immediately asked if he moved as well as the strongest knight commander in the kingdom. The girl said that this was definitely not an ordinary person. Suddenly, the monster attacked Bale and she exclaimed, "So much talk." Ash laughed and thought about how he was just a knight. Although he had already been fired, so he was a former knight. So why was exterminating monsters so highly valued in the kingdom? Perhaps he could bring back the times when they were all together. A year ago, monsters attacked a village near the Imperial Dungeon. The villagers ran away from there and called for help. The boy fell to the ground and began to call for help, when suddenly Ash appeared in front of him and ordered the 13th squad to attack. The villager was surprised and exclaimed, "The Imperial Knights have come. What a fight." In the castle, the king held an award ceremony for the captain of the 13th Knight Squad for exterminating more than 500 monsters and saving the village. This is a noble deed, and for honorable military exploits, he is awarded the knighthood and is henceforth called Ash Hearts. The king placed the tip of his sword on his shoulder, and Ash thanked him. He stood up and heard the high-ranking people complaining about how they were nothing and just monster cleaners. They protected one village. He didn't remember them preventing invasions from other countries. Ash narrowed his eyes and thought about how much damage would have been done without their intervention. Couldn't he show a little more chivalry? It must be a veil to them, and he was just a man who had received a title, and with a beautiful bride to boot. Rafi asked if they had waited long. Ash smiled and said that he had just arrived himself. This girl was his fiancée, the second daughter of a nobleman from Krat Lagan. He couldn't refuse the engagement. After all, it was a proposal from a high-ranking member of the Empire. Ash helped Rafi sit down on a chair and thought to himself, on the contrary, it was a great honor for him, but he wasn't complaining. After all, he just wanted to get married, build a happy family, and retire. They were sitting in the garden, and Rafi said that it was a little chilly outside. Ash offered to throw something on top, but she replied that it was okay, since this conversation would not take much time. Rafi happily added that she wanted to break off the engagement. She hoped for his understanding, because their marriage was initially her father's wish. The protagonist worriedly thought, why does she want to break off the engagement? Rafi embarrassedly said that she had also become closer with the Count's family, and his knighthood does not reach the aristocracy at all. He himself understands who she will marry. She likes the Count more, and it is immediately obvious that he is noble, unlike him. The butler began to take her away, and she asked him to forgive her. Ash remained in bewilderment and thought that everything was so simple. In the meantime, Ash came to the palace to the head of the department and asked what happened. Mike sarcastically said that he was fired and did not make him repeat it twice. Ash tensely asked, "Is he fired?" Mike replied that he was bothering him, both at work and in personal matters. The protagonist examined him and remembered Rafi's words, Mike Livlau, the son of Count Livlau, so it was him. Ash smiled uncertainly and asked, but what would he do on the road? After all, the head of the department has no experience. Mike asked sarcastically, does he think that he can't do anything because he is an Count? Upstart commoners have always had an inflated self-esteem. He ordered him not to think that he can intimidate him by exterminating monsters. MC thought that this could turn out badly and the situation seemed difficult. What should he do? Maybe he should talk to the deputy head? Mike handed him a paper and said that his favorite deputy had left on a mission, and even more so, the official document was already ready, so objections were not accepted. He was a problem for them, and defeating monsters was not such a big deal. And he was just pathetic. The protagonist plunged into memories of how the aristocrats spoke badly of him. He gritted his teeth in anger and turned to the door and said that he understood, asking for his forgiveness. Mike stopped him and said that all the squad's equipment would have to be returned. After a while, Ash ran through the palace courtyard and thought that he hated everything about knights and aristocrats. He had enough of this. He wanted to stop everything and just be free. Drink alcohol, which he gave up for the sake of saving money, and smoke cigarettes, which he had to quit. sleep at least until lunch, and have a good fight from time to time just to test his skills. That's how he wanted to live. The protagonist held his equipment in his hands and thought that first of all he needed to return it all so that rumors would not spread that he was a thief. He looked at everyone present and thought, "What is this, and why does everyone have such vile looks?" The crowd laughed at him and whispered that this is the one with whom the engagement was broken off. It's very funny. Ash went to the equipment stand and said that he was returning the equipment. Suddenly, Mireille ran into the armory and asked if he was really leaving. MC said that he was fired. Mireille replied that she could guess whose doing it was and asked if the engagement was also broken off. He was confused and said that the rumor spread too quickly and asked what kind of trifle she was talking about. She poked him in the chest with a sneer and said that it was just a rumor, but they said that the engagement was broken off because of his perverted role-playing. The protagonist exclaimed in fear that he did nothing of the sort. Where did such rumors come from? Mireille chuckled and said that it was all because of the same person who fired him. He was trying to portray himself as a hero who saved a lady from the hands of a pervert. Uruka stood uncertainly outside the door and thought about how she was ahead, but was still late. She suddenly opened the door and said, "So that's where Mireille is." They looked at her in surprise and she said that the HR department was looking for her. Mireille asked in confusion, "HR? Why all of a sudden?" Uruka answered that she'd hurry there and find out. Mireille said that she and the main character had not finished their conversation yet, and running out of the armory, she thought that she would solve everything after the HR department. Uruka looked out after her and encouraged her, "Keep it up." She closed the door and with tears in her eyes asked the mentor, "Is it true that he's leaving?" Ash agreed and replied that he had to leave. Uruka exclaimed that the management was full of idiots. Ash thought, Urika is the fourth daughter of the Baron and has been a knight for many years. At first, she only cried during training. But over the past 3 years, she has grown a lot, becoming a reliable young knight. It's a pity that he has to leave her, since he would like to see her become even stronger. Urika grabbed his hand and told him not to worry about anything. She would go with him, and wherever he went, she would be there. The protagonist tensed up and asked, "Eureka?" She looked at him with loving eyes and said that she could keep him company even at night, and they would immediately forget this evil boredom. For his sake, she was ready to play any role-playing games and would play with the mentor. She asked him not to doubt, since she would accept him no matter what. No matter what anyone said, she would be on his side. Ash called out to her and asked in bewilderment if she really believed these rumors. Eureka stood in a stupor, and MC said, "So she believed." She screamed that she just said it as a joke to let him know that she was ready to do anything for him. The protagonist awkwardly said that everything was fine and she could not worry, but it was unlikely that she would be able to prove his innocence. He said goodbye to her and added that he would rest where no one knew him. Eureka fell to the floor and asked him not to leave and to leave at least something to contact him. She began to think madly that she needed to prepare faster to follow him, to leave the knights in the house too. She would not give him to anyone. She was already following him. After some time, as soon as he decided to leave the kingdom, he began to organize his affairs. First of all, MC gave up his title and became an ordinary commoner again. Ash thought that he could finally say goodbye to the aristocrats. Then he began to sort out the luggage and household items, and then another 2 days were spent on processing various documents. Ash looked at the palace and thought that his parents had long since passed away, which meant that everything was over and he was getting a little lonely. The man in the window watched the protagonist and said that he had missed an important moment. Meanwhile, Ash approached the train station and thought about where he should go now. He wanted to go to a certain place. The Rosebell Kingdom is a country that has developed its economy through technology. As far as he knows, it is famous for its magic tools. Most of the Empire's magic stones come from this kingdom. Such a developing country is a good choice. At the station, the loudspeakers announced that the train to the Rosebell Kingdom was leaving soon. After a while, Ash watched from the train window and thought that he felt a little lonely. Suddenly, a man approached him and asked if he could sit next to him. Was he traveling because of a broken heart? The protagonist awkwardly scratched the back of his head and said that this was a slightly different story. The man happily exclaimed that Rosebell was a great kingdom, the food was delicious, everything was cheap and convenient. And most importantly, the cities were bright and vibrant, perfect for a heartbroken trip. Ash smiled and replied that that sounded great. There were dungeons, right? The man agreed and added that there were 3 dungeons. He would like to start a business in a dungeon, but what about him? The protagonist said that he wasn't sure that was possible. The man noted that this train was also an example of the kingdom's technology. Sounds like magic, right? MC wondered if there would ever come a time when everyone could do such magic. It sounded like a dream. After a while, he arrived at the kingdom. The loudspeaker at the station announced that the next station was the second dungeon in the western part of the Rosebell Kingdom. The man said that it was time to say goodbye. Ash thanked him for telling him so much. He called out to the protagonist and welcomed him to the Rosebell Kingdom, wishing him a nice day. Ash looked at him in confusion, then smiled and thanked him. MC looked around and said, "Here he is." He thought that there are so many people and it is easy to get lost. There are 3 times more stations than in the Empire. Ash looked at the map of the station and asked where the exit was. The man came up to him and offered to help him. He said that he could show him the exit if he wanted. The protagonist bowed his head and said that it would be very kind of him. The man asked if he was new here. Ash replied that he came here from the Empire. The man added that everyone gets confused at first, but in the kingdom, many people travel on nests. Ash wondered if they do this every day. He thought it was a means of transportation for the rich. The man told him that the kingdom has a decent supply of magic stones for such purposes. Since he came here, the tickets have become cheaper, right? The Empire relies on importing magic stones from their kingdom, which probably makes them more expensive. Ash wondered in confusion. The difference was too big? Was it a good decision? The man happily spread his arms out to the side, introducing the kingdom, and recommended him some restaurants to make his sightseeing more enjoyable. The protagonist smiled awkwardly and thought, there are a lot of them, and then thanked him. They walked out of the main entrance, when Ash noticed a carriage with a personal assistant in front of him. He was surprised and thought, is this a personal carriage? Is he a person of high status? The man turned to him and said that this is where they parted ways. The protagonist bowed in respect and thanked him for telling him everything. The man took off his hat and told him to enjoy his tour of the kingdom. After a while, Ash arrived at the witch's castle and looked at it and said, "Here is one of the sights." He looked at the streets of the kingdom with interest and said that this city is amazing and everything is so beautiful here. He noticed a knight and thought, is this a dungeon conqueror's equipment? I wonder if they are going there? The girl greeted him and MC turned away from her in embarrassment, thinking that he now had a trauma. Wherever he looked, everything was so beautiful and fashionable. The whole city was just blooming, and the faces of the inhabitants were calm and friendly. Maybe he was right in choosing this kingdom. He looked at the sky and seeing the sunset there said that the sun was setting, and it was time for him to go to the tavern. He entered the room and the girl kindly showed it to him. Ash was surprised and exclaimed how bright it was. The maid added that they use magic lighting. And this is a shower. Hot water is always available at the turn of a switch. The protagonist asked, is this a suite? The maid said that this is an ordinary room. After that, it was night outside and Ash was lying in bed thinking about how he was worried that the hotel was overpriced overall. But it was barely higher than the Empire. The country must be rich. He closed his eyes and thought that tomorrow he would go to the market, and he couldn't wait to see what the kingdom was like. The knights were standing near the dungeon, from which monsters began to emerge. Meanwhile, Ash was walking along the morning streets and looking around. He shook his head and exclaimed, "Here is the clock tower." He arrived 10 minutes early. Bale called out to him and happily grabbed his hand. The protagonist apologized and asked how long he had to wait. Bale replied that he had just arrived himself and was very happy to see him. He offered him a glass of wine today, since they had already arrived. Although it was still early and he could introduce him to the city for now. MC smiled and thought that it was lucky that they finally managed to meet. Yesterday, while exploring the city, he noticed the knights gathered in a crowd. Ash exclaimed, "Those were the Rosebell Knights." How long had he seen them since they often fought in sports tournaments? I wonder how Bale is doing. He is a royal knight with whom he fought many times, and they have become good friends over all this time. The protagonist thought about it and said that he should contact him, when suddenly he noticed Bale in the crowd. He approached him and asked what he was doing here. Ash said that it was a long story. Bale apologized and said that he was currently on duty, after which he invited him to have a drink together tomorrow. They have a lot to discuss, don't they? MC agreed with him and thought that he was a smart man who didn't ask too many questions. Bale smiled and said that he recommended a place in the central district. He suggested that they go there after visiting the market. Ash asked if it was probably an elite district. Would they be able to walk there? Bale told him that not everything there was expensive. The prices there were barely higher than in other districts. After some time, they came to the market, and he said that this place is popular with the townspeople. Not only food is sold here, but also all kinds of products and things. Ash examined the goods and stopped at the apples. He exclaimed, "What beautiful apples! In the Empire they are much worse." Bale asked, "Really?" And then he called the seller and asked him for one apple. They began to move further, and MC added that the quality of the goods here is higher. They are not expensive, but good. Bale answered, "This is all because the products are grown in the dungeons." Ash, perplexed, bit off an apple and asked, "How is that?" Bale smiled and said that the weather and temperature do not change there, so everything grows stably, and trains make transportation easier and cheaper. In addition, the kingdom buys wheat to maintain stable prices, so people do not starve. They approached a stall that sold baked goods, and Ash said that it really wasn't much. It seemed like they thought a lot about the people here. The meat and fish seemed fresher than in the Empire. Bale said that demon meat can't be eaten because it's poisonous, but the livestock industry here is pretty good, despite the difficulties. The main character added that it seemed that the quality here was really high, and offered him something to eat. Bale took him to a restaurant and told him not to worry, because today they will get drunk to their heart's content. It's a whole beer alley. They clinked glasses for the meeting, and MC took a couple of sips of the drink, happily exclaiming that this is the best way to quench his thirst. Bale asked why he was brought to Rosebell. Ash hesitated with an answer, and he said that it was okay if he didn't want to talk. The protagonist asked if he was ready to listen. If he was honest and told everything that happened during this time, then he would definitely listen. Bale listened to MC's story and said that the Empire was definitely stupid. To give such a night to other kingdoms, he should thank them. Ash said that he thought it would be difficult to go back after all this. Bale said, on the contrary, he would be very happy if he settled down with them, and such meetings would happen much more often. Protagonist answered that it would be nice, since Rosebell seems to be a better place than the Empire, and the food is good here. Bale happily exclaimed, that's right, their knights are more like aristocracy, so it won't suit him, and asked, what about a dungeon conqueror? Ash took a bite of food and asked, they hunt monsters, right? Bale agreed and added that it had its downsides, of course. They make a living by selling magic stones and materials collected there. The price rises and falls depending on demand and the demon's strength. With his skills, he could make a lot of money. You need to get permission for this, and once you get it, it will be impossible to move to another country. On the other hand, it will be easier to get citizenship. This is done so that stronger hunters and conquerors are not used in the war. In other words, it is easy to get in, but impossible to get out. Ash smiled and said, but this is a dream job. Bale replied that it is dangerous and many die, but he would be happy if he became a hunter and thought this role would suit him. Plus, there will be more time to drink with friends. MC noticed his friend's cigarettes and he explained that although he was trying to quit, in the current circumstances he could afford it. He offered him to take one too, and the protagonist did not refuse. Having blown out smoke, he realized that he had not smoked for a long time. Bale was glad that he liked it. He offered him to order another drink. This whiskey is made from special barley from the dungeon. It is quite a rare pleasure. They clinked glasses to celebrate this freedom. Ash drank it and said that it was very tasty. Bale does not understand what is wrong with being a hunter, earning money, enjoying alcohol and cigarettes, leading an idle lifestyle. MC agreed. His friend really knows how to persuade people well. Returning to the topic of their conversation, he said that he would contact the association when he had time. A few days later, Ash got ready to go, happily saying that breakfast was so good that he even stayed late. He headed to the association, and on the way he saw knights running somewhere, as well as groups of people who were talking about something. Why was it so noisy here? Inside the building, the crowd was even bigger, and the protagonist wondered if he was at the wrong time. Bale called out to him from behind and said that he had come just in time. Happy to meet him, MC asked what was going on here. His comrade explained that there was an outbreak of demons on the 10th level. No one expected this. The dungeons are fraught with many mysteries. The number of demons does not decrease even if they are exterminated, and the corpses disappear on their own. There are levels where the sun shines, and in some places there are even jungles with extensive vegetation. When the number of demons increases, they invade the outside world. There were even cases when entire cities were destroyed. The employee approached Bale and asked what kind of demons were there. He shouted that they were blue monkeys. There were more than 300 of them, and they moved in packs. On behalf of the order, he urgently appeals to the hunters for help. He left the selection to the association, and the girl obediently ran on. He turned to his friend because they really need his help. The girl asked, who is he anyway? Bale explained that Ash is his old friend. They are similar. Maybe MC is even better. He is a former Imperial Knight of the 13th Division, nicknamed the Fighter Ash. The protagonist was embarrassed and asked the others not to call him that. In the Empire, hunting demons is considered barbaric. Besides, it is a humiliating name given to a person who has lost comrades in battle. Bale encouraged him. It is a glorious nickname. Let him just imagine a knight who kills demons with lightning speed. Besides, he will gain experience as a hunter. What does he think? Ash quickly made a positive decision, and Bale was happy that they will fight together. He is looking forward to it. MC modestly replied that he will just try not to interfere with him. Sometime later, at the second dungeon, Ash chose the appropriate equipment, everything from the chest plates to the magic sword. Incredible quality. Bale said that in view of the urgency, they will provide him with equipment this time. Finally, their squad began to move forward along the corridor. At the crossroads, the protagonist saw a sign on the wall that the second level and the stairs are on the left. It turns out that the lower levels have already been cleared. Level after level, they left behind a few people, in case of a breakthrough of the main body of monsters. Ash realized that the next floor is the third, and called out to the others when they came out of the dark corridor. Seeing other views in front of him, he was surprised. "What is this?" Bale asked. "This a completely different atmosphere, isn't it? This is the place where demons appear. Usually they set up camp here, but now they have cleared everything out." MC is sorry that he did not live to see this, but his friend reassured him, because then everything will return to its place. Finally, they got to the path to the fourth level. Now it is closing the shutters. As soon as Bale said that it would give them some time, loud sounds were heard, and he ordered the others to get ready. Ash accepted the order and looked at the sword that had a special stone on it. This magic sword is a magical weapon developed by the kingdom. This sword has an additional function that sharpens the blade. It is not a weapon that you can buy at a local store. It must be used with extreme caution. Bale told the others that they will be in the front row and everyone else should cover the rear. The knights asked in shock, "Just the two of them? Is the captain completely crazy?" They smiled, because they will be fine. The shutters began to bend from the blows with a loud screeching sound. The monsters knocked down the gates and rushed forward. Bale screamed that they were coming and ordered everyone to get ready. He grabbed the sword and deftly dealt with the monster. Ash ran from the edge of the battlefield and said that he could not let it get ahead. Suddenly, a monster appeared next to him and the sword itself attacked. He looked at it in surprise and thought, "What kind of sword is this?" Bagel asked, "How does he like this sword? How strong is it?" Ash said that it is magical, and with such power it is not necessary to cut off the head. Bale was exhausted after another attack by the monster, when suddenly another one appeared behind him, but he dodged and cut off its head, saying that if it immediately quieted down like that, then he would have to cut off its head. Bagel attacked the monster again, and Ash was surprised that it was close. He cannot believe that they do not die so easily. Bagel put his hands on his sword and said that these guys are special, and will take revenge to the last. MC said that he will continue, and then rushed to attack the monster and threw it aside with all his might. The monster grabbed a tree and pushed off from it, and flew straight at him. Ash managed to react and thrust the sword right into its mouth. Bagel smiled and praised him. The protagonist called out to him and asked if he really enjoyed his work. They stood with their backs to each other, and Bagel asked if he had decided to move here permanently to support each other like this. Having dealt with the monsters, a girl ran up to them and called out to them. Ash asked her what happened. He grabbed the sword and said that he knew that Master Bagel was strong, but what they did. They had heard only a little about their comrade. They say he is the equal of Commander Beige, and in the Empire, he stopped a wave of 500 demons by leading only one unit and killed 200 of them by himself. The knight said, "Maybe he is a rough diamond that only shines in the dungeons." The girl asked, "Really a real hero?" The knight said that he is not just a hero. If you compare him, he is one of the best swords in the entire kingdom. A title given to 10 knights who worked hard to clear the dungeons. The girl said sadly, he is able to defeat the blue monkeys without much effort. Beige said that they could never hope for something like that. Another knight asked, "Of course, this is great, but will they help?" The girl said that she does not know, but it seems like they will have to. After a while, Ash shouted that everything is ready, and she happily asked, "Are they so fast?" The knights went down to the 10th level of the abode of the blue monkeys to check the anomalies. While everyone else was resting, Ash asked if level 10 was dangerous. Bagel replied that it wasn't really, since it was a hunting ground for mid-level hunters. The protagonist thought about how Bagel had said that more vile demons appeared from level 16. But there seemed to be fewer of them, and there had never been an influx of demons below that level. If monsters below level 5 came here, it would be a disaster, and all the residents would have to evacuate. Ash looked at him with displeasure and thought that if that happened, the hunters would have to join them. Hardly, this was a job one could only dream of. Bagel smiled and said that, to be honest, he was glad that MC was here. Ash was surprised and happily thanked him, and then said that he actually called him right after a get-together and he hadn't gotten enough sleep. Bagel laughed awkwardly. After the mission, they came to collect their reward, and Bagel handed over the battle report and told the girl at the counter that the order would be presenting records with more detailed information later. The girl handed them the paper and said that this was their reward for preventing the demon attack. Ash looked at the reward in confusion and thought, "Is this 300,000? Bagel put his hand on the counter and said that this is not all. The girl said that she would add the cost of the materials from the killed demons to it, and then asked, does he want to become a hunter? Then he should definitely join their guild. She smiled sweetly and added that strong people are welcome among them. Bagel said with a smile that they would definitely help with that. He thought that they could handle the formalities. The girl smiled and said that if they could afford it, then he should teach him the basic skills. Ash thought in confusion about what they were saying without even asking him. After that, under the enthusiastic greetings of Bagel and the girl behind the counter, he became one of those who conquer dungeons and hunt monsters. Ash walked down the street with a huge bag and thought that first he needed to go to the bank. After all, such a large amount of money is too dangerous to keep on yourself and should be deposited into an account. He noticed how people around him began to look at him askance and said that now it began to seem to him that everyone around was hunting for his money. The protagonist stopped near the photo postcards and took one, remembering Maruka. He thought that he did not want to leave this place anymore and contact her when he got used to the kingdom. He approached the seller and handed over the postcard to buy it. Ash looked at the postcard and began to hope that she was fine and had no problems. I wonder if she would answer him? Meanwhile, at the palace, the butler called Aruka and said that she had received a postcard. She thanked him and took it in her hands, very surprised. Uruka walked into the room and announced with an embarrassed smile that she was leaving the guard. Murray put his hands behind his head and asked in surprise, "Why?" She awkwardly twirled her arms around herself and explained that she had received a letter from Ash. He said that he had started working as a hunter in the Rosebell Kingdom. He leaned his hands on the table and asked if she wanted to follow him. She happily confirmed this, and he, putting his hands behind his head again, asked, "As a hunter? You can make money by killing demons, right? That's how cunning he is, Ash." The Empire laughed at him just because he was in the 13th squad. Maybe he should go there too? Where is Ash? Uruka raised her finger with a smile and answered, "In the first city of the dungeons." He asked if she was ready to go yet. She sat down on a bench opposite him and answered that she was not. She had some business with her parents. He answered, "I understand. I'll have to tell Will later." At that moment, the door opened slightly, and Will stated that he had heard everything. They turned their attention to him, and he, entering the room, said that for various reasons he was taking over the family business, so he thought that it was time to quit too. Murray thoughtfully said they were just disbanding. He noted that it looked like it. Uruka added with a smile that she did not mind. They decided to leave the road to the young. After some time, an employee of the Hunters Association handed the protagonist a license card and asked him to show it to the association staff when he entered the dungeon. Smiling, she greeted him and said that they would give him the best reception. He smiled awkwardly in response and thanked her. Then he asked if there were any tools he should buy. She raised her index finger and said that the most important ones were a repeller and storage bags. Then he took his card in his hands and turned around, thinking, so he is now a hunter? At that moment, Bale was standing nearby and, folding his arms across his chest, congratulated him on receiving his license. The protagonist looked at him and asked in surprise, "What about work?" He replied that he took a day off. He knew that yesterday was hard for him, so he decided to apologize and help him get ready. How about having a bite to eat together? The protagonist agreed with him, and then they went outside. Bale taught him a lot. Stores that serve hunters are usually located in the southern part of the city. Trusted establishments have a special mark. This is done in order to avoid disputes between civilians and hunters. In the end, they bought everything that the association would recommend. Then Bale, entering another store, said, "And now, weapons and armor." The owner of the store is a good man. Hey, he brought a future regular customer. Carmelo stood behind the counter and said happily, "Master Bale, is there a new hunter with him?" He confirmed it, a newbie, but more skilled than him in some things. He clarified, "Is he really a hunter, more powerful than the Royal Knight?" Bale smiled and said he was from the Empire and had just arrived. Then the MC and the shop owner shook hands. The protagonist said he was looking for a sword and a breastplate. The shop owner laid out several swords in front of him and said they would start with the weapon. Which length did he prefer? The protagonist turned the weapon in his hand and said, "This one." He thought this sword was the same as the one he had in his service. He then put the sword in its sheath and said he liked it. Carmelo said, "There are 3 types of different materials. He can try them all." After that, the protagonist tried a sword made of steel, attacked a wooden dummy. He thought it felt familiar. Then came the first alloy. He noticed that this one had no recoil in his hand, a good cut. After that, there was the second alloy. He thought it was sharp, but too light and uncomfortable. Then he looked at the sword thoughtfully. The first alloy, or maybe he would be better with his usual steel? Bale asked. "Does he want to try?" MC clarified. "Is it possible?" The shop owner said of course, they will spar. The protagonist shouted that he understood, and the next second, they began to fight Bale. He said that next time he will take the fight more seriously. MC agreed with him and thought that he missed the old days, when a bit of hesitation could be fatal. Then he swung his sword, their swords crossed, and he thought that he brought that feeling back. After that, he moved back and thought that he was told that sparring is boring, but it is fun. Thank you, Bale. Now the next blow. The next second, Carmelo shouted for them to wait. This isn't a training ground. Bale laughed awkwardly, and the protagonist said he would take the sword. Then they went inside and started putting down their purchases. The protagonist thought that Mr. Carmelo's skill was evident in his goods. He would come to him from now on. Then he started putting the sword in the bag and cried out in surprise. The sword was longer than the bag. But the sword began to sink deeper, and Bale asked with a smile, "It was convenient, right?" Then he offered him a drink to cheer himself up. MC agreed with him. The next day, he began his career as a hunter. Learned a few things while doing this. The life of a hunter is more expensive than it seems. Providing food and drink, maintaining and replacing equipment, he was paid for this in the order, but hunters are left to their own devices. Come to think of it, he dived to the 13th floor deciding to earn some money, but it was not enough for him. He thought, a comfortable life. After a while, the protagonist looked at the descent to the 13th floor and said, "It's time to go." He thought that he hadn't gone any further. He needed to be careful. He went down the stairs, and as he walked into the corridor, he noticed that the atmosphere here was completely different. Then he saw a skeleton coming out of the darkness towards him, and said in surprise, somehow they appeared quickly. The monster swung his weapon, and MC, holding his sword in front of him, said, "What a catch." He then kicked the skeleton, causing it to fall apart, and thought that it was very fragile. He had heard stories about them. If you don't pull out the magic stone or destroy it, the skeleton will come back to life. It seems the rumors were true. The next second, the skeleton began to recover, and he thought, considering how much money he would earn, he should deal with it. After that, he looked at the magic stone, and thought that this is what the magic stone is bigger than the other monsters. It's still profitable. After that, he saw a group of adventurers heading forward, followed by several skeletons. He shouted, "Are they okay?" The girl turned around and asked for help, and he, pointing his hand back, said, "This way. Run to the stairs." He stopped next to the skeletons and thought, it's time to use this thing, the smoke ball. After that, he threw it towards the skeletons and everything around was covered in smoke. He hoped that it would work. After that, he crouched down next to the injured adventurer and, putting his hand on it, said like this, "Now they will patch him up for him." He thought that they couldn't do much now. He said that they needed to quickly go up. With the help of the hunters who joined them on the upper levels, they saved his life. After some time, he was standing in the corridor. A man came up to him and thanked him for saving his life. The protagonist, folding his arms over his chest, replied, "No need. Other people healed him." The doctor left the room and remarked that without his help, he would have died already. The protagonist said, "Good news." The man then thanked him again for his help. He said that they were not good enough for level 13, but MC knew that when he thought about how much money he had earned, nothing had changed today. After that, he sighed and said, "It was hard being a hunter." After that, he handed a pack of cigarettes to the man and asked if he smoked. He took one cigarette and thanked him. The protagonist thought that it was a terrible job. The man smiled and said that if he lived long enough, it wouldn't matter. There was always a job that would require at least one hand. The protagonist noticed that this was true and thought, it seemed like he had pleasant memories of the past. I wonder how his old friends are doing? Sometime later in the Burgound Empire, Will waved and told them to take care of themselves. Mireille waved back and also said goodbye. Uruka wished him the same. Then she looked away and said that she wanted to clarify. Does he like Master Ash? Mireille waved his hand and replied that he did not. Then he folded his arms over his chest, added that he respected his skills. She thought about it and he added, perhaps they are a couple. What will she do with her family? Smiling, she said that she was cutting ties with them. He was surprised. Seriously? After some time, the Eltowine family. Uruka, sitting on the floor, sorted out things and said, these are the earrings that the master gave her. She thinks she should wear this, since he liked it. So, and here. She was surprised looking at the bottle and said that she did not have to use it because their engagement fell through. After that, she put it in the suitcase and thought that she would take it just in case. She said that she would still have to pay for being a mentor. Then she attached a bow to her hair and said, Ash, she must console him. As a birthday present, she would like to know his opinion about her outfit. After that, she left the room holding the suitcase in her hands, and the maid, seeing her, asked in surprise where she was going. She answered that she was leaving the country and going to the Rosebell Kingdom. All the best. The next second, she stopped in surprise. hearing her father loudly calling her. He came out from behind the wall and shouted, "She quit without warning? And now she decided to leave the country?" Turning around, she nodded and said that from today on, she was cutting off all ties with her family. She thanked him for everything he did. He clenched his fists and shouted, "Stupid girl. If that's what she wants, then he'll teach her obedience." Then he swung and ran forward, but she dodged his fist and then punched her father in the stomach, slowly. He fell to the ground, and she, landing on him, swung her fist again and said, "If she wins, she can leave, right, father?" Then she slapped him hard in the face and said that she will live as she sees fit. After that, she approached his face, grabbing his clothes, and added that she will not let her family interfere with this. He can consider that she is dead to all of them. After that, she hit him again, and the maids ran to her father in alarm, and one of them cried out, "Mistress, she must wait." But Uruka adjusted her hair and thought, "Mentor, he must wait for her. Farewell, Empire. His beloved is coming to him." After some time, the Burgound Empire. Rudrich, the deputy commander of the Imperial Guard, sat at his desk and said, "The other three, as he sees, have done so too, and this crazy idiot took it upon himself to approve it." He looked at the document in front of him, which said, "Approve the following dismissals. The 13th Squad, Murray, Will, Uruka Eltawine." He grabbed his head and said, "There will come a time when the Empire will have to focus on dungeons, and then battles with demons will become inevitable. They have experience in hunting demons, they need the knowledge and skill of the 13th Squad. What to do now?" At the same time, in the kingdom of Rosebell, the man, enjoying his food, said he is called to explore the 20th floor of the dungeon. Any comments? Bale replied that he thought they did not have enough knights and hunters. He cut a piece of meat on his plate and bringing the piece to his mouth added, "A friend of his recently became a hunter." The man was surprised. "Is this true?" He answered, "The same one he told him about." He asked, "Is he as good as him?" He answered that it is. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and added, "This is a rare opportunity. He will personally make a plan for its implementation." The man, smiling, said as he wishes, "But why did he suddenly become a hunter?" Bale answered that he was a former knight of the Empire and seemed to have lost the favor of the nobility. The man sighed and said, "The Empire is an aristocracy, a stupid act." Meanwhile, in the Rosebell Kingdom, MC, covering his face with his hand, noticed that someone was clearly remembering him. Raj agreed with him and, smiling, said, "Everyone is talking about it." Talon, holding a dish in his hand, asked, "Did he reject all the offers?" The protagonist took a mug with a drink in his hand and said that he is self-sufficient for now. Raj clenched his fist and said with a smile, "Yes, any party will take him to themselves. He is very popular." Talon added that he heard that there is a named on the 14th level. If you defeat him, the girls will not leave you alone. The protagonist clarified, "Named?" Raj explained, "A rare demon that appears from time to time. There is a special reward for hunting him." Talon raised his index finger and added, "He is described as a demon in black armor and without a head." MC asked, "Is he strong?" He answered that they say that other demon hunters have already defeated him. The protagonist asked, "What happened?" At that moment, Uruka came up to him from behind. Talon confusedly said that there was a very beautiful girl there. Uruka covered his eyes with her hands and told him to guess who. He asked in surprise, "What?" She smiled embarrassedly and then moved to the side. He asked, "Uruka?" She, smiling, said that he guessed. Sometime later, they came to a coffee shop and the protagonist asked what brought her to Rosebell. She, holding a cup of drink in her hands, said that it was obvious. She had come for him, the mentor. He asked, puzzled, "What?" She moved closer to his face and, placing her index finger on his nose, said that he would not go anywhere from her anymore. She was here forever. He moved away from her, confused, and asked, "What about the squad?" She explained that she had quit. Then she sat back down in her place and added, "There was no point in being a knight without him. She was going to become a hunter too." He objected. In fact, hunters were supposed to renounce their previous citizenship. She, smiling, explained that she had already taken care of that. Her father had said that she had to defeat him if she wanted to leave. Well, she had. He was surprised. "Seriously?" She answered, "Exactly." He asked, puzzled, "Did she really want to become a hunter?" She confirmed it. She wanted to stay by his side. Maybe they could somehow legitimize their relationship? He asked, worried. What was she talking about? She asked, what was it? At that moment, memories flashed through the protagonist's head, where everyone was looking at him. He thought he was a coward. She put her hands on his hand and told him not to worry. She would always be with him. He said, "Uruka, the wounds inflicted by that fool have not yet healed." She was surprised. "A fool?" And then she said that everything will be fine. She promises. She swears on her life. She came up to him again and said that she will not betray him like that fool, and will definitely be there. So one day, please, he must tell her the cherished words. She will wait for it. Then she added how glad she was that that fool did not take her mentor. She will heal his hearts with her pure love. He awkwardly asked, so maybe they should go back to the inn? It's not far. She agreed with him, and after a while, MC called her and said that this is actually his room. She replied that it was true, and pressed herself against his back. He called her, confused, and then she closed the door behind them, and clinging to him, said that she came here earlier and prepared everything. She hoped that now he understood that she was serious. Now they would be together. Mentor. After some time, the protagonist jumped up in fear on his bed, seeing Iruka there. He thought, he didn't touch her. How did this happen? Then he reached out his hand to her face and said that he shouldn't do this, but the next second she opened her eyes and, smiling, said that he could touch her more boldly. He was surprised, so she wasn't sleeping? In response, she laughed. Her face turned red with embarrassment when she reached out his hand to her face and said that he could do whatever he wanted, she would be glad. He pulled his hand back in fear and said that today she would receive the documents. He got up from the bed and added that after that, together, they would go sightseeing. After some time, they came to the association, where everyone paid attention to them and discussed Iruka. The protagonist indignantly asked what she did. She pressed herself against his hand and said with a smile that she did nothing. Then they went to the reception desk, and the protagonist, holding out a document, said that they would like to get a license. Iruka, still holding his hand, greeted the worker. Their eyes met. The worker thought, and yesterday she said that she would kill anyone who approached him. He hangs out with people like that? She is Mr. Ash's girlfriend, right? Iruka desperately said that she is his subordinate. Then the worker threw the card and shouted, "Done." The protagonist asked Iruka to stop, and she took the card, put it to her face and thanked her. After that, they turned around, and she said that now they can go to the dungeon together. We need to go shopping. After some time, they visited a store, and she, demonstrating a couple of outfits, asked what he preferred. He was indignant. They were going to a dungeon. She was surprised. Is this not suitable for a hunter? He answered, not at all. The store employee approached them and said, not the most pious girls wear such things at the initial levels. For modest money, they raise the fighting spirit of the squad. He imagined a girl in a bikini fighting monsters. MC said, that's how. Then the store employee took the swimsuit and said, but this one is bought for a different purpose. There are different types of girl hunters. Iruka, thoughtfully putting her hand to her chin, said, I see. After that, she took 2 swimsuits and asked which one he liked better. The protagonist pointed to a black swimsuit, and then they made their purchases. Iruka leaned towards the protagonist's ear and said that she thought he would appreciate it better in the evening. He blushed with embarrassment and told her not to talk nonsense. They left the store, and she replied, come on, he likes it. He continued walking forward and said that the weapons store was that way. After some time, they came to the right place, and he greeted the owner. Carmelo greeted him back, and then the protagonist pointed at Iruka and explained that he needed to pick out a weapon and armor for her. The store owner folded his arms over his chest and asked what she owned. She answered, bows. Then he demonstrated a popular model, a compound bow. It has everything you need. She noticed that it was very different from the Imperial one. Carmelo said that this was a real breakthrough in weapon development. The arrows were made of demonic material. No country could repeat this. Iruka took the weapon in her hands and thoughtfully pulled the bowstring. Carmelo said if she was familiar with bows, how about the one with a crossbar? There are many different ones, but she looked at the bow in her hands with a smile and said that she would take this one. This one is the most comfortable. The shop owner replied that he knew it. Now all that was needed was a quiver and arrows. After that, he placed the items in front of her, and she replied that she would take them all. After that, she looked at the protagonist and asked, mentor? He took out his wallet and said that he would pay. Then they left the shop, and she laughed slightly and said that she would definitely show what she was capable of. He agreed with her and added that unlike knights, hunters were free. He wanted to enjoy life now and not be dependent like in the Empire. She pressed herself against his hand and said that in that case, she would also have fun with him. After a while, she stood in a swimsuit and fixed her hair, sighed, and said, a shower is a great thing. The protagonist looked at her in confusion and she arched in front of him. He looked away and then she sat on his lap and he cried out in surprise. She reached out to his face and he sheepishly said that he was not ready yet. She replied that she understood and thought that they really should wait. Then she leaned towards his ear and added, but can't she try to do everything herself? At that moment, the demon on the protagonist's shoulder shouted, come on, he is a man, Ash! The angel crossed his arms over his chest and said, a man and a woman must maintain decency. The next second, the protagonist moved her away from him and said that he was going to take a shower. She yawned and said that tomorrow they would go to the dungeon together. Mentor. After that, MC started taking a shower and thought that he could handle it. He has a backbone. Meanwhile, Iruka took off her shirt and thought that she didn't even know. Maybe white would work better? Meanwhile, the adventurer raised his head and thought, did anyone survive? I need to pass on a message. This demon is too strong. The next day, they left Carmelo's shop. He waved at them and said that he would pack the arrows and they could come back if they needed anything else. The protagonist waved back and thanked him. Suddenly, one boy ran towards them. When he ran up to them, he put his hands on his knees and bent down. He was trying to catch his breath. Then he said that he finally found them. MC looked at him and asked what happened to him. The boy took his hand and said that he should immediately come to the association. It's urgent. They need their help. The protagonist looked at Iruka and said that they should go, and she agreed with him. After a while, they arrived at the Hunters Association. They walked, and MC looked around. He asked, "What the hell is going on here?" Then the association worker thanked them for coming. She added that there was a thing. One of the hunters was covering his face with his hands and saying, "Death." The protagonist looked at him and thought that he thought it was one of the survivors. Then the association worker leaned over to him and asked for help moving him. MC helped her. Then they stood near the door, and the worker told him that the two groups that attacked Namida were destroyed. The protagonist thought that there must have been about 10 people. Then he asked what kind of demon it was. She answered, "A headless knight in black armor with a flaming two-handed sword, capable of cutting his opponent in half." Iruka put her hand to her mouth, closed her eyes, and said that it was terrible. The association worker added that this demon was clearly not strong enough for a level 14 demon. Information about it needs to be gathered, and she asks them to help, or rather, to accompany the body collectors. MC looked at her and asked, "Collect corpses? Not to defeat or investigate?" She folded her hands in front of her chest, lowered her head down, replied, "True, the ultimate goal is to destroy the demon, but it is too dangerous. They can get information from the corpses without interacting with the demon. If it does appear, they would be better off running." The protagonist agreed. Then he turned to Iruka and asked, "Will she go with him?" She replied, "Yes." The second dungeon. The corpse collection mission will be carried out by the following people: veterans who regularly hunted on the 13th floor, as well as male corpse collectors who looked to be between 50 and 60 years old. MC looked at them and thought, there are 9 bodies in total. He then said that it would be difficult to take them all at once. One of the male corpse collectors told him that if there is time, they will take everyone. They will tie the bodies on the back, wrap them in cloth, and tie them with ropes. The main character thought about it and said that it would be hard. They went down into the dungeon. Iruka held her bow in her hands, happily said that at least they figured it out. Then, one of the men told them that they would help them on the way, and they should take care of the monsters. Iruka turned to him and said that she understood everything. Then they met demons on their way. They stopped, and MC said, "Skeletons." The men said that this time their first task is to return the corpses. They should not hesitate. The protagonist agreed with them. Then he looked at Iruka, asked if she could hit the magic stone. It glows inside the skeleton. She replied that she understood everything. She took her bow and arrows. Pulling it, she fired and hit the target exactly. MC shouted that it was a great shot. Then he told her that there was no need to break formation, moving to close combat. Then he asked if she could kill all the monsters from afar. She took an arrow in her hand and said that she just wanted to test the durability of the arrows. She asked to let her do it. She made a few more shots and successfully killed all the demons. They walked on, then the protagonist heard footsteps and thought that the steps were heavier than a normal skeleton. He raised his hand up and shouted, "Stop!" Then he glanced to the side and saw a headless demon in black armor. "It's named," he shouted. "Back!" They all turned around and started running. MC shouted that they should go up. He ran after everyone and looked back at the demon and thought that he shouldn't be here. It's not even the 14th floor. Then he stopped and thought, isn't he chasing them? He started to examine him. Named stuck his sword into the ground and put his hands on it. The protagonist stood and watched. Then he said that this pose, it's like he's waiting for him. He took out his sword and stood there like a knight waiting for his opponent. He challenged him. The thrill of the final blow that ended everything, the tension of the shortened blades. MC wanted to feel it again. Iruka turned to the protagonist and said that they had to go. He looked at her and apologized. She glanced at his face and said that his face was worried. He put his hand on his cheek. After some time, they arrived at the Hunters Association. The association worker put her hand to her mouth, said that, unfortunately, they would have to give up on retrieving the bodies. The protagonist folded his hands in front of his chest and asked, "Is she sure?" She told him that they had no choice. It was a pity, since they would not be able to explore and control the lower levels. Like now, the goal was to win, not explore, let the hunters do their best. If the situation escalated, they would have to call the knights. She didn't think that would work now. Then she looked at the protagonist and asked, "Doesn't he want to hunt?" MC looked at Iruka, then he lowered his head down, closing his eyes, asking for forgiveness that he couldn't answer right now. She replied that it was okay. After some time, they came home. Uruk came out of the shower and dried her head with a towel. The protagonist sat on the bed and said that they needed to talk. She sat next to him, and he replied that he wanted to fight this demon. It was his choice. She did not have to participate in this. She grabbed his face. He asked her, "What is she doing?" She replied that she was trying to figure out if he was the mentor. Said the same thing when the monsters broke through. He remembered that when he was an Imperial Knight, he told everyone in the 13th Division that they didn't have to come with him. She was the loudest back then, saying that she would go with him. She then told him that there was a similar incident back then. MC sat there and looked her in the eye and said that people died back then. She replied that they all admitted that they were willing to die. It wasn't his fault. She also said that she would always be with him. No matter how strong the enemy was, they would fight together. The protagonist replied that she could die this time too. She raised her hands, clenched her fists, and shouted that they wouldn't lose. She then grabbed his hand and added that if he died, she would be with him. They would go to heaven hand in hand. MC put one hand on his leg, lowered his head, and thanked her. She then said with a dissatisfied expression that if he died, she would stay. What would she even do here? The protagonist looked at her and replied that he was leaving his property to her. She looked at him happily and replied that she was just like a widow. Then, she laughed. She added that she still wanted to talk to him about what would happen after the victory. MC lay down on the bed and said that if they won, they could eat something tasty. She looked at him and added that good food would be nice. Then she said that she would like to receive a reward. The protagonist answered that he understood her. She asked him, "Does he promise?" The next day, they went into the dungeon for Named. The most problematic factor was the flaming sword that melted metal equipment and cut people into pieces. Many died instantly from the blow of such a weapon. They prepared as many weapons as possible to be ready for anything. And then they headed to the 13th level of the dungeon. The owner of the shop told him to come back alive. He walked and thought that he would defeat him. They came to the dungeon and met the demon. MC noticed the corpses and looked at their wounds. Then he looked at Named and thought that he could feel them, but he didn't even move. Then, the protagonist took off his backpack and put it on the ground. He crouched down and put his hand in the backpack. He took out his sword and looked at Named. Then he thought that he was reacting to the obvious desire to fight. But he's not ready yet. He's waiting for him to be ready, right? MC was laying out the swords along the wall and thought that was good, just how he should get ready. After he laid out all his swords along the wall, he said, like this. Then he grabbed his sword with his hand and asked if she was ready. Ruka said yes. The protagonist pulled out his sword and pointed it at him. The demon prepared to fight. MC shouted, "Let's go." MC stood there, looking at him and thought that no one else was moving except him. He paid attention to his stance. He is not a simple animated skeleton. He clearly understands fencing, and the sword is not yet engulfed in flames. The protagonist thought that he could try to attack him. He ran to attack and thought that he had the advantage in distance. So, it was time to maneuver, and he was not in a hurry, thinking about something. Named swung his sword and attacked the protagonist. MC dodged the attack and thought that he did not have enough distance, but if the sword caught fire, it would be very difficult. The protagonist tried to plunge his sword into him, but the demon was able to parry his attack. MC thought that he was good at wielding a two-handed sword. Named carried out his attack. The protagonist managed to dodge. He thought that he should not let his guard down. Then he stood in front of him and thought that he would definitely call the flames soon. Ruka shouted that she was ready. MC turned to her and replied that she should wait for now. Then he put his sword forward and ran to attack, but the demon was able to stop him. The protagonist flew to the side and shouted, "Damn it!" He paid attention to his movements, sword skill. Then their swords crossed. He looked at him and said that he was not just a demon. Then MC dodged his attack and thought that he was a knight and well-trained. Then the protagonist clenched his fist, said that his name was Ash Hearts. He is a former knight of the Berglund Empire. The knight held a sword pointed at the protagonist. Then he raised it up. MC thought it was a knight's greeting. He knew it. Then he looked at Uruka and said that this was his fight only. She held a bow in her hand, answered, so that he would not forget about the promise. If they met in the tournament, it would be a good fight. Then he closed his eyes and said that he was sorry that he would never know his true name, but he will tell everyone about his power. Then he ran to attack, but that the demon was able to stop him again. Then he hit the back of his armor. Their swords crossed again, and the protagonist said that he would then hit again and again. Will they let him give in? MC dodged his attack and thought that he was not letting him get closer. This is great. This is a real knight's duel. Then he shouted that he had been looking for this for so long. Their swords speak for them. and in order not to become like him, he will seek an honorable death in battle. Then he added that he will finish him off himself. Then he attacked him and was able to break off a piece of his armor. He looked at it and noticed that he had broken a piece of the armor in the place where the magic stone was. He joyfully shouted, "Found it." Then he thought that one hit on the stone and it's over. Name put his hand on the broken piece of armor. Then he swung his sword and his sword became covered in flames. The protagonist looked at it and thought a flaming sword. He prepared for the attack and thought that if his skills were that good, he should switch to another stance. The demon raised his sword up. MC shouted that he knew it. The demon attacked him and the protagonist barely managed to dodge his sword, but it scratched his armor. MC looked at his armor and said that if he had just a little more, it would have been the end. He was pierced. The demon raised his sword up. The protagonist thought that a knight wielding a magic weapon was even normal. No wonder it can't be sold on the market. But that doesn't mean he'll give up. He started walking around him and then crouched on the ground. Gritting his teeth, he said that victory would be his. He dodged his attack, thought that he can't attack right away. He needed patience, he needed to concentrate. He dodged all the attacks and thought that patience and a little more, and then he saw an opening for his attack. And shouted, "A direct attack, it should slow him down a bit." He ran towards him, rolling on the ground. He was right under the demon and was able to hit the magic stone cleanly. Then he shouted, "It worked." He slid on the ground behind him, and then looked at him and saw that he was still standing. Then he thought, did he just break off a part? The demon began to hold out his sword to the protagonist. MC looked at him and thought, what is he offering him? Does he want him to kill him? If it was man versus man, it would be decided in one blow. Then he reached for the sword and asked, "He's thinking about this, right?" He took the sword from him and closing his eyes thought, that means it is over now. Then he swung and shouted, "Farewell, Black Knight." He plunged the sword into his chest and added that he was true to his principles to the end. Meanwhile, in the second dungeon, on the upper level, there was a reserve group. They were waiting. One of the hunters said, "Will Mr. Ash cope?" The second answered him that there is no doubt, he will cope, everyone will see. The first doubted, considering the enemy and how many people died there, you have to think about it. Suddenly they heard someone's footsteps. One of them exclaimed that this is definitely the protagonist. The second suggested, or a demon. In any case, they need to get ready, not a step back. The men took a fighting stance and prepared to attack. The protagonist came out to them, and in his hands was the same demon, or rather his armor. The hunters shouted in turn, "He is back." What happened to Named? Holy saints, did he defeat him? This is how the most cruel demon was defeated by the protagonist. When they returned to the guild, a huge crowd of people was already waiting for them, who were admiringly discussing this event. Someone asked the protagonist, did he really defeat him? Someone asked them to show the trophy to the people. Everyone was pushing, everyone wanted to be closer to the hero and see everything. Ash was met by the receptionist girl. She boldly pushed everyone with her elbows and shouted to let them pass. When they entered the guild building, the girl turned to the protagonist and told him that this was a crime. The protagonist was surprised. What was she talking about? She replied that this material was very valuable. It should be handed over to the Royal Institute. Such material cannot be handed over to the wrong hands. Ash and Aruka thought, oh, this bureaucracy. The receptionist continued that she would call the knights, and they should not pocket anything for themselves for now. The protagonist noted that, to begin with, they did not need trouble. The receptionist girl became even more heated. She even got wet. It was all so serious. She demanded a report from them and that they write down the unclaimed materials in it. The allies understood everything. Uruka looked at the protagonist. He asked her, well, what? She was wondering what they would do next. The protagonist ruffled his hair and said that when the knights arrived, they would sort out all the nuances. He sat there embarrassed and tired. Uruka admired him. She thought, he is so cute. In everyday life, he is wonderful, but in battle, he is a real monster. But she was once again convinced of his coolness. That look of his when he fights is like the look of a wild animal. He is insightful to the marrow of his bones, bold and courageous. You can feel the strength of a mentor in him. He is not like any warrior she knows. In that bestial fighting state, he is able to fight until his last breath. And for this, he puts everything on the line. This is his strength, and the reason why she liked him. And the most important thing is his fight for the others. No wonder she fell in love with him. When they returned to the base, he praised her. And this ugly receptionist only gives problems. What a pest she is. The protagonist noticed her gaze and smiled at her. Uruka smiled back at him and thought that now everything is fine, because now she is next to him, and completely happy. At that moment, Bale came to the base. He called out to his friend and asked him to show him his loot. The protagonist was very happy to see him. Bale examined the trophies and concluded that they have armor and a sword. Ash paid attention to the demon's armor and noted that it is difficult to destroy the demon's stone without damaging the armor. Bale told him that it is not such a big problem. He took the sword, twirled it in his hands, then frowned, examined it more carefully, and finally exclaimed, "Is this a magic sword?" The protagonist asked him what was so special about it. His friend told him that the magic weapon he had lent him was powered by magic stones, and this sword could be used as much as he wanted. The protagonist remarked that it sounded just like a legend. Bale chuckled and replied that it was. Ash was surprised. Did he mean to say that it wasn't a lie? Bale told him that even legends had a little truth to them. He continued that he would check everything out and that they should write reports for now. Ash muttered, "What should I write?" Bale told him that he wanted to know about combat reports and unclaimed materials, basically everything. The protagonist looked at the form dejectedly, wondering where to start. His friend asked him how the battle went. The protagonist replied that the demon was as strong as a true knight. Bad remarked that he knew it. "This armor looks like the armor of the old standard royal knights." The protagonist replied that everything was clear to him now. He added that he would like to know his real name. Bale said that he would ask the people from the institute to look into the matter. He would let him know if the people found anything. The protagonist thanked him. Then he stood up, stretched, and suggested that they go home. He was very tired. At that moment, Bale called out to him and asked if he had already chosen a name for their group. The protagonist asked again in surprise, "A name?" Uruk replied that they had not decided yet. MC thought, "Janus?" He remembered his first squad. The name Janus is the name of an ancient god with two faces. They were named so for their ability to fight both humans and demons. They fought and protected the villages of commoners who were not subject to the Empire's mercy. But it was not only about service. They bore this name so that their comrades who gave their lives protecting others could join this noble god after death. The protagonist smiled and told his friend that their squad was called Janus Squad. He asked Uruka if she agreed to this. The girl laughed and answered him affirmatively. The entire guild rejoiced when they found out exactly how the protagonist named his squad. Talon said that it was a great name. Someone shouted that Ash was a demon hunter. Someone called him Lord Ash of the Janus Squad. In general, they all feasted that day. Everyone chanted the protagonist's name and drank to the bottom for the new hero. After this feast, the next 2 days were days of the protagonist's terrible state. Then he was able to get out of bed and told Uruka that they should go for a walk. The girl agreed with him. They were called out by Bale, who asked the protagonist if he could talk to him. The fact is that a faded inscription was found on Name's armor. Apparently, he was a royal knight once, and tried to conquer the dungeon. The protagonist said in surprise, "So that's how it is." He wondered if this happens to all those who died there. Bale told him that he did not know. They still do not know why exactly demons appear. But they will leave the reasoning to the institute, and they themselves will do their job. They said goodbye. Bale told them at the end that they will soon be given a reward, and let them look into the association. The allies came to the guild, as promised Bale. The receptionist girl told him that they will update his cards as soon as the situation with Named settles down. Then he will be their permanent member. Haruka grumbled, "And why does he need it?" The receptionist told her that he will have obvious benefits. The protagonist agreed with the girl. She continued with a displeased look. After they wrote off his contribution to the association, she would transfer him a reward of 5 million. The allies were dumbfounded when they heard such a figure. 5 million? The protagonist thought, 2.5 million for both of them? That's a lot of money. A loaf of bread cost only 100 roses. When he got home, he was still surprised. That's a hell of a lot of money. At that moment, Uruka, sitting effectively on the bed, called him. She reminded him of the reward. He hadn't forgotten about it, had he? The protagonist replied that he hadn't forgotten. The girl called him to her. The protagonist, not suspecting anything, approached her. Uruka laid him on the bed, lay on his arm, and said that from now on she would sleep on his arm, and she would demand a kiss from him good night. That would be her reward. He thought embarrassedly, "Is that all? Was that her plan?" She noticed his reaction and asked him if he was disappointed. She was not against them doing something with him, but he himself said that they should wait. Although she did not think it was fair, the protagonist thought that it was true. He was making her wait. He could not believe that she was still waiting for him to make a move, so he had to do something so as not to offend her. He raised himself up on his hand, turned to her, and said that he cared about her. He wanted her to be with him. As a man, as her mentor, he wanted to be her support. Uruka, deeply touched by his words, said that everything was fine, she would be there, and would never leave him. She looked at him with love in her eyes, and thought that she would prove that they would always be together. The next day, they again entered into battle with monsters. One could admire how they worked together. He warned her that there were 2 opponents to her left. She deftly dealt with them using her bow. The protagonist thought that not everyone worked in groups at level 15. He hadn't thought about it before. He and the girl had been fighting together since they became knights. Their synergy was top-notch. During such battles, he always remembered the others. He wondered how Murray and Will were doing. Would they meet again? Meanwhile, in the first city at the Hunters Association, Murray sadly said that no one from the Empire was here. She hoped to meet someone here and grab some roses, because her wallet was already empty. Going outside, she thought sadly that she knew nothing about this kingdom. What should she do? Meanwhile, the protagonist and Aruka met Tanya Sandor in a cafe. Aruka asked him who this girl was. The protagonist answered her that Tanya was the leader of the Sword of the Goddess group. She was the one who stood up to Named First and other dangerous creatures. She is also a noblewoman, so he does not advise Aruka to be rude to her. Tanya smiled and said that it was nice to meet the young lady, but she shouldn't have been so shy. She continued, they had questions for her, didn't they? The protagonist replied that they did. He was interested in the 16th floor. Tanya replied that she understood his interest. They wanted to know how to defeat the big bird. Ash admitted that she knew what she was talking about. They had looked there while doing a research task, and the bird had attacked them. To be more precise, one of its exploding feathers had almost caught them. Tanya told him that there was a simple solution to such a situation. The protagonist was surprised, right? The interlocutor smiled at him and replied that he needed to take them with him, and his girlfriend too. The protagonist hesitated with an answer. Tanya asked him if she should consider this a refusal, but it is a truism. The more people, the safer. Here she smiled invitingly and added that the protagonist could do whatever he wanted with her body. Aruka and Ash choked on her words. Tanya noted that he would earn money and she would hug him. In her opinion, this was a good deal, right? The embarrassed protagonist answered her that this was not the case at all. He said that he needed to leave for a while and left the girls. Aruka, forgetting about all decency, angrily told her rival that if she touched her mentor, she would be finished. Tanya grinned and noticed her jealousy. Then she added that she needed not only Ash, she would like her too. Aruka did not even know what to answer this impudent girl. Tanya continued that she could afford such a thing. She liked her, and she would like to take her to her place. Aruka called her interlocutor an idiot. How could she even talk about this? Tanya told her not to worry. Tanya was confident in her technique, and her subordinates were happy. The protagonist's friend said with disgust that the nobility was a strange people. The interlocutor answered her that this was their essence. She always gets what she wants. Honor and pleasure. That's why she uses her main weapon, her beauty. Aruka was indignant. She did not lose. She also has something to show. And if we talk about her mentor, he is not interested in such ladies like her. Tanya noted that if she was going to talk to her in such a tone, then it would be better to move from words to actions. Aruka was surprised. What was she talking about? Tanya answered that she was attracted to strong men like the protagonist, and not only her. Aruka grinned. She understood what the interlocutor wanted to say. She said that she would not allow her to take her mentor. Tanya grinned again, like it was expected. Then they should start with a competition. Who will drink more? When the protagonist returned to the table, he watched in surprise as the girls quickly drank alcohol. He called out to them, but the girls did not hear him. They continued their competition. He pulled Aruka up and told her that she should stop. She rudely told him to shut his mouth. Then he turned to Tanya. It was time for them to end their stupid competition. The girl agreed with him. They were playing around. She handed him a note and said that she would give them some guidance. The girl narrowed her eyes and told him to aim for the bird's wings. They could also try to land it on the ground and cut off its head. This, of course, would be an option, but it would not be as effective. If they were really that good, they could take a risk and show themselves. The protagonist looked at her note and thanked her. She came up to him, grabbed his face, and continued that she would wait for him, and that she meant it. He muttered back, saying that he didn't think she should wait. At that moment, Aruka asked for another glass of wine. The protagonist pulled her up. She'd had enough. Tanya said goodbye to them and left. When Ash carried Aruka on his back, the girl muttered that she wouldn't give him to anyone. He smirked, saying, where would he go from her? The next day, when they came to the guild, he asked Aruka how she was feeling. Was she okay? The girl, as if nothing had happened, answered him that she felt just fine. The protagonist was surprised by this, considering how much she had taken yesterday. Aruka noted that she hadn't drunk so much in a long time. They saw Tanya at one of the tables and waved to her. Talon and Kyle approached them. Talon greeted them. Kyle noted, were they called too? At this moment, Bale entered the hall, wished everyone a good morning, and asked them if everyone was there. After confirming that everyone was there, he spread out a map on the table and asked everyone to get to the point. The order was asking for their cooperation. Due to the uproar in the capital over named, they had decided to conduct a large-scale investigation. He continued that the second dungeon was the only one where something like this had appeared in the past few years. The Institute suspected that something was wrong with it. They would like them to accompany them to the deepest point. The knights were puzzled. The deepest level? The 20th? Bale continued that the capital would of course send its people. They would be knights of the Second City, high-level hunters of the Second City Association, several scholars from the Royal Institute, royal knights, and several groups of ordinary knights. Tanya asked him if this was all necessary. He told her that it was. They could consider this an order from Her Majesty the Queen. Sir Edgar Bairn from the Institute will personally supervise the expedition. Tanya said thoughtfully, well, if so, then the question is off the table. The protagonist said that he had heard this name somewhere before. Raj told him that he was from the tale of the Bairn heroes. They were quite famous in the kingdom. The Bairn family was also named after him. Talon was surprised. Edgar is a wizard? Bale answered that everything is correct. He said that he will help them with his magic. Tanya said that this is encouraging. Bale looked at the protagonist and noted that the wizard was interested in named. Therefore he, as his friend, is counting on his help. The protagonist was surprised. What was he talking about? His friend said that this wizard is a passionate explorer of dungeons and demons, and this whole plan was conceived partly as an excuse to make him, the protagonist, talk to him about named. Tanya remarked that this was very much like him. The protagonist asked them in amazement, did they want him to deal with an old man who was crazy about dungeons? Bale and Tanya told him that he was absolutely right. Raj chuckled and told the protagonist that he would have to take care of the nobleman. Ash became worried. He would just ask him, right? Bale continued that the investigation would begin in 2 weeks, so everyone should be kind enough to get ready and not go anywhere. The association would be informed about the investigation, but first of all, they needed to find out the level that each of them had reached. It turned out that Tanya had reached level 18, Talon had reached the entrance to level 17, as had Kyle. The protagonist replied that he had passed level 15 and level 16 for a preliminary examination. The receptionist girl began to explain the examination route to them. She said that the research would begin in 2 weeks. During this time, the necessary materials and tools will be delivered, and people from the capital will arrive. The main action will begin as soon as everything is ready. She added that, depending on the schedule of people in the capital, the schedule may change. Tanya noted that the nobles are fickle. Will they be punished if the schedule is shifted for their convenience? The registrar irritably answered her that anything is possible, so let them not stay in the dungeon for too long. She noted that they also have a request to explore from the 13th to the 15th level. The girl asked them to continue working for the good of the kingdom. The protagonist replied that they have not fought seriously on the 16th level yet. Should they test their strength beforehand? The registrar told him that there is no need for that. During the expedition, knights with magical weapons will become the main fighting force. She asked them to simply help the expedition, but not to fight. Kyle ironically asked her if they will be baggage carriers. The girl said something like that. The protagonist thought, what a job, carrying supplies that don't fit in the storage bag. The receptionist continued that she would also ask the Sword of the Goddess to show the way. Therefore, she urged them to attend the meeting later. Tanya muttered that she understood everything. The receptionist girl asked everyone if there were any more questions. Kyle raised his hand, worried about the fact that the knights, their main fighting force, had suffered heavy losses. What if they were in mortal danger? She told him that they should follow orders. Kyle ironically concluded, in other words, the safety of the nobles is above all else. Talon said that with a noble accompanying them, they would not be forced to go too far. Tanya echoed his sentiment, saying that reinforcements would also arrive from the capital. She didn't think it would be that dangerous. Still, they needed to be prepared for anything. Let them make sure they had plenty of supplies and weapons. Ruka laughed and asked her if they would be especially useful. Tanya continued that there was a bird on level 16. The demons on levels 17 and 18 would also cause a lot of trouble. If they got too close, the fight would be tough. So, they had better have more ranged weapons. The protagonist replied that they understood everything. He would do his best. The girl also noted that the problem would be on level 19. During previous research, it turned out to be the most difficult and expensive. Kyle replied that since then, magic weapons had improved. He did not think that they would have so many problems. Tanya insistently said that they had to be on their guard. The protagonist thought about the girl that she was cautiousness itself. That's why she was the best in her field. Talon summed it up. Well, it's time for them to get ready. They could only hope that the other knights would not let them down. Ash asked Tanya what was on level 20. She replied that according to the reports, it was a large level, but without demons. There was little data on it, so everyone should focus on the 19th level. Considering the damage it had done to expeditions in the past, the 20th had probably not been properly investigated. Judge raised his fist above his head and urged everyone to get to the bottom of it this time. The protagonist supported him. The receptionist said that was all she had to say. She added that they were counting on them. After some time, Ash and Haruka looked at the gray-haired man in surprise. It was Edgar. He said that all this was interesting, but he wanted to know more about Named. He turned to the protagonist and asked him how he appeared. Did he sense his will? MC assumed he was a knight. He thought at the same time that he was already tired of all this talk. They had been talking for 2 hours already. Edgar thought about something. Ash said he didn't want to seem rude, but could he know his name? The man came out of his reverie, folded his hands, and told him his name. Edgar added that his son was the prime minister, and he himself was the head of the institute. The protagonist thought in surprise, was this the same wizard? He then introduced himself to the man and introduced his ally. Edgar replied that he knew about it from their report. The man leaned back on the couch, took out a cigar and told the protagonist, as for his assumptions that this demon was once a man, he was inclined to agree with his conclusion. He added that he examined his armor, and it really looked like old-style armor. The protagonist asked him if it was possible for a dead man to become a demon. Edgar lit a cigar and noted that this world was full of mysteries. One should not forget about magic. It only just dawned on the protagonist that Edgar had lit a cigar with his own finger. Haruka had noticed it too, and she was just as surprised as Ash. The man asked them if they would mind if he lit up. Haruka had responded in amazement that she had never seen magic before. The protagonist worriedly said that this stuff would do him no good. Edgar had told him that he knew that, but it was his outlet. If they understood, he hadn't slept well since he was a child. Ash thought that this was an unusual affliction for a wizard. The man had noted that he had gotten distracted and had returned to the topic that had been troubling him. He had said that they knew that this demon had a magic sword, but it was originally a regular weapon. MC was surprised. Was he being serious? Edgar had continued that there was something called a magic element. It was believed to be the source of magic consumed by wizards. The dungeons were full of it. If an ordinary sword is left in it for a long time, it can turn into a magical one. The protagonist and his ally listened to him, their mouths open in surprise. He continued, an ordinary sword, a magical element, gives magic to ordinary objects. They say that people have a soul, right? And what happens when this soul combines with magical elements and is transformed? Do they guess? The protagonist suggested, what if a creature like this demon is born? Edgar said that purely hypothetically, if they can unravel the magic of the dungeon, then perhaps they can unravel the mystery of Named. This is the truth that the kingdom is looking for. Isn't it romantic? The protagonist thought that they can go now? Edgar said that it was true. He learned everything he wanted. At that moment, Sergio and Bale came in. Sergio excitedly turned to Edgar and asked him where he disappeared to. The man turned to them and asked them to listen to what he had to say. He goes with the protagonist and Uruk to explore the level where Named appeared. All 4 of them stared at the wizard in amazement. What did he say? Edgar urged them to conduct a preliminary dive before a large-scale exploration of the deepest level. All the allies were speechless at his suggestion. But in the end, everything came to the point that they did a preliminary exploration of the dungeon. Having plunged into the virtual space, they found themselves in that very dungeon. The protagonist pointed out the place where the battle with the demon took place. Edgar said that it was simply amazing. He thanked both of them. They began to explore step by step. The protagonist looked at the wizard. He noted that despite the already long journey through the dungeon, he showed no signs of fatigue, as well as no rest. It seems that this man is no slouch. He asked Edgar what kind of tool was in his hands. The wizard replied that it was a magic element meter. The stone embedded in it changes color depending on the amount of magical element in the environment. Ash was surprised. Have such things already been developed in the kingdom? The man replied that it was not so. It was a relic from the treasury of the royal castle. He could tell its story. It was worth it. They would see it many times during their research anyway. At that moment, something incomprehensible began to happen to everyone present. Sergio was shivering like with a fever. Bale also felt unwell. He suggested talking about the magical sword inside. Haruka covered her ears with her hands and screamed that she could not hear anything. The protagonist thought that he would never tell anyone about what he was told. Meanwhile, the researcher noticed that there was an anomaly of magical elements in this place. The deeper they went, the brighter the color of the stone burned. He suggested that they continue their research. In the heart of the 14th level, Edgar stopped everyone, telling them that they had arrived. The stone in his item turned blue. They needed to look for a hole or a hiding place somewhere. They began to carefully examine every millimeter of the room. Finally, Sergio called out to the researcher and reported to him that he had found a small hole. Edgar approached him. looked into the hole, and said that there was some space there. It seemed that this wall blocked the original passage. This was caused by vibrations in the dungeon. The protagonist asked him again, "Vibrations?" Edgar explained that perhaps over time the dungeon blocked the passage, which used to really exist. The protagonist was surprised. The dungeon itself closed the passage? The researcher continued that several similar cases had been reported before, although the conditions for their occurrence are unknown. The ancients called such a dungeon a man-eating monster. Perhaps they were not mistaken, a monster that lures people into its belly. Since it is alive, even the holes in its belly can be sealed by themselves. It is also capable of changing its entire structure, and if he adapts to the environment, then destroying the walls is useless. After a while, they returned to the real world. Bade asked the protagonist if they were okay. The protagonist answered that they were fine. The receptionist girl turned to Ash, happy that he was back. She apologized to him, but they needed to make an urgent report. At that moment, some rustling was heard. It was the researcher who appeared. Sergio asked him to wait. Edgar turned to the gentleman hunters. He would like them to carry out construction work in the dungeon. A reward of 100,000 roses for each, regardless of the result. Everyone in the guild began to excitedly discuss Edgar's request, and most importantly, payment for the work done. The registrar turned to Bale. She asked him to stop the wizard. The guy only sighed heavily. And so, on the 14th floor, due to the orders of the high nobility, the association and the knights united. The preparation was short. The protagonist humorously thought that he was encouraged by the presence of the muscle-gathering party here. Talon apprehensively asked him if there really was a passage here. The protagonist answered him that he felt a flow of air. There was definitely something there. At that moment, Sergio exclaimed that they had broken through. Edgar theatrically threw up his hands and shouted, "Let everyone look!" He knew that there was a passage here. He turned to his assistant Sergio and called him to follow him. The guy wanted to protest, but the protagonist noted that they should go too. The protagonist knocked on the wall and asked Edgar if the texture of the walls and the ground were different. He touched the wall again and noticed that it was cold, like metal or something. The researcher suggested that it must be a fluctuation effect. Sergio asked in surprise, "What was that?" When they got rid of the wall, a sad picture appeared before their eyes. There were skeletons in armor behind the wall. The researcher came closer to them, examined them, and noticed that they looked like named friends. The protagonist asked what he was talking about. Edgar explained that they must have died here for the same reason. Then the dungeon shifted and they found themselves trapped in the wall. If there was a body that was not sealed here and that was exposed to the magical element for a long time, it was him. The protagonist asked him if he thought it was named. Edgar answered that anything was possible. The amount of magic here is simply off the charts. The stone is simply blinding with its color. Ash was worried. "Is it safe to stay here?" The man answered, "If for a short time, then yes. They, wizards, are sensitive to such things." The protagonist calmed down, but he wondered if there was a way to reduce the amount of magic element. Edgar noted that it cannot be controlled at the moment. He will have to wait until it calms down on its own. At this point, Uruka turned to the mentor and asked him what kind of door she saw. The researcher became curious about it. The protagonist tried to open it, but it did not open. He put all his efforts and with difficulty managed to cope with it. They looked inside and saw a staircase leading even lower. Edgar wondered, another passage? He also noted that it was too dark here. MC agreed that he was right. It was too dangerous here. The researcher said that the endpoint is probably on the lowest level. They had obtained valuable data on the 14th floor, so they should finish their research here. A few days later, the protagonist and his ally saw a wagon unloading something. The protagonist noted that it was the Order. They were preparing supplies for the expedition. Uruka asked the MC, "The knights will be coming from the capital, right? This will not cause conflicts." He replied. Bale said that they have no difference in status. Ash added that he also worked with them several times, and unlike the Empire, he did not feel any discrimination based on status. Uruka felt that he and Bale were too close friends. The protagonist asked her what she was talking about. The girl sadly replied that he often talks to him, but not so much to her, and even now, he is more interested in him than in her. Ash thought, but she is right that he often talks to his friend lately. He complained to him that he was tired of communicating with Edgar. He was simply unbearable. The protagonist simply felt sorry for his friend, so he listened to his complaints. He said that she took him. Today he would focus on her. She sarcastically noted, "How cute." Ash began to justify himself to her. He told her that he cared about her. The girl answered that this was all true. She was silent and added that she was a little embarrassed to talk about such things on the street. Then he offered her to have a snack in a cafe. The protagonist ordered her favorite dishes and caringly told her to eat. Uruka simply enjoyed the tastes of the dishes. He noticed that she was in a good mood. The girl answered him that she was just happy to eat delicious food whenever she wanted. She continued that they had saved up so much money, she wondered what they could spend it on. Ash answered that their expenses were taxes, living expenses. She smiled and noted that he was too rational. The protagonist replied that if they were to continue saving money, he would simply consider buying a house. The girl was surprised. A house? He replied that she had understood correctly, buying a large house with a garden. He would like to have a place where he could store his things and equipment. He added that even she needed her own room to have her own corner, right? She was indignant. Her room? She looked at him with such a meaningful look that the protagonist apologized to her. He did not want to offend her. She did not like this idea. Uruka, with a huge effort of will, coped with her emotions and answered him that everything was not so. She was just happy with his idea. She continued that it was good here, but there could be difficult times ahead, like when they were in the Empire. She thought they needed to be prepared for such things, so that, despite everything, they could return home, to where they could feel safe. He told her that he would also like to have such a place, where she would be too. At that moment, she could no longer hold back and burst into happy laughter, saying that she agreed. When they left the cafe, Uruka giggled happily and remarked that she was just like a wife. The protagonist agreed with her. He thought that he would tell her when everything was over. That's why he had to make sure that nothing happened to her in the dungeon. Finally, the day of the exploration came. They all gathered on the 3rd level. Bale announced that the knights of the 2nd city would go ahead. The knights of the capital would follow them, escorting the employees of the institute. He ordered the hunters to carry supplies and guard the rear. The protagonist looked at the podium. On it stood S. Bale, Sir Edgar, and Marquise Roy Orano, the commander of the Knights of the Capital. The protagonist had heard about him from his friend. Bale said that this man bears the title of one of the 10 swords of the kingdom, and he's much older than he looks. They've known Edgar since childhood, and this time he's also participating as an assistant. Ash realized that his friend had described the man very accurately. He looked impressive too. Bale commanded them to go forward, and the expedition members set out. He asked them one last time to take care of themselves. So, the alignment of forces looked like this. The knights from the 2nd city, the Sword of the Goddess party, were in front of everyone. Then came the protagonist's squad, the Muscle Gathering party, and the Golden Knights party. The Knights of the Capital and the Institute staff were bringing up the rear. The protagonist hoped for a successful outcome of the operation. All the knights had magic weapons, and they should quickly reach the 14th floor. At that moment, Edgar called out to him and Uruka. He asked, "Are they here?" Ash asked him in response, what was the matter? He led them to the wall and showed them that it was sealed. It was a fluctuation. Sergio noted that this meant a passage behind this wall. The researcher replied that it was. The protagonist and Uruka saw it too, and the magical element reacted. The stone simply glowed red. He exclaimed that this was simply an amazing concentration. The protagonist noted that this meant that there could be something else here. Edgar suggested that they monitor the level of magic around them and move on. The entire squad carefully monitored their surroundings, but they did not see anything. These were the lower levels. Ash said that they would need time to get to the very bottom. Finally, they reached the descent to the 16th level. Tanya informed them that they had cleared the way. Bale told them to follow down. The protagonist answered for everyone that they understood everything. After some time, he, dragging a heavy box, said with a sigh of relief that they were finally on the 16th level. Uruka replied that it was time for revenge. She added that he should be more careful and not drop the box he was carrying. When they safely reached the gathering place, Uruka noted that it was a good job. They needed to pack their things. As soon as the carts were unloaded, they would load the supplies and leave. Suddenly, Uruka froze in place. The protagonist asked her what was going on. She pointed to the very bird they had learned about from Tanya. The girl was surprised that she had been defeated. They had simply crushed her wing. Was that possible? She paused and continued that she thought she could have done the same. If the swords of God had managed, then she could have done it for sure. They could have tried to do it later, with an arrow made of a special alloy, and there would have been no need for a weapon. Although explosive arrows can be more effective. The protagonist, listening to her, noted that he would like to try to defeat her again if he had such a chance. All the participants wanted to set up camp right there at the exit from the level. Uruka turned to her mentor. She asked him if they would put up tents. He agreed with her proposal. They began to set up tents. At that moment, they heard Talon and Raj watching them, remarking that they were very cute. Talon continued that they were a real couple. He understood the girl, like, love is such a thing. Suddenly, they heard someone screaming that there was danger from above. Let everyone be careful. Their camp was attacked. Talon's face changed, as did everyone else, when they saw the monsters about to attack them. All the participants received an order to begin the attack and open fire on the enemy. Someone shouted that there was no end to these birds. The protagonist told Iruk to shoot the small ones, and he would deal with the big one. The girl understood him and began her attack on the smaller monsters. Seeing the girl's first blow, the protagonist praised her. It was a great shot. He also noted that there were a lot of monsters. The tactic did not work. Everyone desperately fought the enemy, sparing no effort. Tanya, realizing that he was making his way to the largest bird, shouted to him that they would cover him. Let him move forward. The protagonist shouted to her that he understood everything and rushed forward. Bale shouted to the warrior archers to cover Ash. He gave the rest the order to protect the archers and not retreat. The protagonist thanked his friend for his help. He proudly thought that the knights acted harmoniously and clearly. It was difficult for hunters to pull off such a thing. Ash rushed forward, burning with a huge desire to take revenge on the big bird. When it was all over, Uruka admired her lover. He did it. He, covered in the blood of his opponent, smiled and noted that revenge was done. The girl handed him a towel and said, "They say, demon blood is poisonous. Let him dry himself well." He agreed with her. It was better for him to wipe this filth off his face. He noted that the girl showed herself very well. She was embarrassed, but happily asked him, "Is it true?" Roy approached them. He turned to them and asked what their names were. The allies introduced themselves to him. He smiled and told them that it was a good fight. He added that he would remember them. When he left, Bale noted that he liked them. The protagonist incredulously asked him, "Is it true?" A friend said that, first of all, the Duke values character. The next day, on the 17th floor, the group again went to explore. The protagonist noted that it was sad to see how the group was getting smaller. Talon sadly told him that there was nothing to be done. The protagonist's team stood ready on the 16th floor. The protagonist said that it was important to have enough people for the rescue. It would be more difficult later. Talon tensed up, said something like, "You only have to mention the devil," and informed him that they were here. They were lizards. Ash ordered the archers to get ready. Then he gave the command to open fire on them and under no circumstances to let the monsters get closer. It became clear that the lizards had such thick scales that arrows simply did not take them. The protagonist was surprised that this did not work and told the archers to aim for the neck and heart, where the scales are thin. At that moment, the opponents turned around as if retreating and began to dive into the swamp. The protagonist realized that they were provoking them. He thought that something stronger than arrows would be needed here. So Ash grabbed his sword. He shouted for Uruk to cover him. At that moment, someone called out to him. His faithful friend Bale approached him and said that he would help him. Together, they entered into battle with the monsters, noting that they were very durable. Also, the lizards were very agile and had a variety of attacks. This was not bad for monsters of this level. He thought that they were very nasty creatures. It looked like they would get stuck here with them. At that moment, someone called out to his allies. They saw Roy approaching them with his team. He shouted for the guys to step aside and gave the order to his team to stay in groups of 3 people and stab these demons. The protagonist noted with surprise that it worked. Roy urged everyone to hit the monsters without stopping. At that moment, the protagonist noticed that one monster was approaching Bale, who did not see him. Ash reacted instantly and pierced the monster. Bale realized what had happened and cursed. The protagonist chuckled and told him not to thank him. Edgar's cry was heard, calling on everyone to stay away from the swamp. When the warriors retreated, the researcher used magic and directed the blow straight into the swamp where the monsters had gathered. When they were finished, the wizard went limp and said that powerful magic requires a lot of energy. The protagonist said with admiration that it was an amazing blow. Talon was surprised, so this is the power of magic. He noted that magic is not an easy matter. Meanwhile, Edgar asked Roy if he was sure that this was the right place. He thought that he would not be able to repeat something like this again. Roy told him that he was sure. Their task was to get to the next floor. Tanya said that lizards would appear on the 18th floor as well, but due to some conditions, they were even worse than these. Roy asked her how they were different. She explained that until now the lizards were classified as demons, but those that would come next were soldiers. The men asked her again, "Soldiers?" Tanya replied that it was better to see for themselves to understand. She suggested leaving the scientists and guards for them on the 17th floor and going on themselves like this. That's what they did. Tanya said that the lizards on the 18th floor were a species close to humans in terms of cultural development. Bale asked her, "Is this a settlement?" After examining the monsters, he noticed that they were indeed soldiers. The guy asked the girl, "Are they the only ones here?" She answered him that she did not know. They did not kill everyone since they managed to escape. Bale thought about it. Roy noted the state of his ally and asked him what was bothering him. The guy replied that they needed to keep losses to a minimum. The king of the lizards was on the lower floors, and their last expedition was half destroyed here, not to mention the further path. They reached the 20th floor, but were too exhausted to continue. Roy told Bale that he understood his condition, but they were not the same as they were then. The guy sighed and gave the order for everyone to line up. When this was done, he said that they would stay in the rear, and in the meantime they would take care of everything else. Those who remained in the rear should form a defensive line and concentrate. Spearmen will be in the front, archers in the rear. Bale raised his sword and gave the order to open fire. After a while, it became clear that they were able to hit the enemy. The protagonist asked if they were weaker than those before. Tanya answered that it seemed so. At that moment, the lizards opened their mouths and called for help from magic in the form of fireballs, which flew towards the allies. Bale ordered everyone to defend themselves. He noticed something was wrong and shouted, "What's wrong with the shields?" One of the knights answered him that they were melting. They can only withstand one blow. Roy noted that the shields held up after all. That was progress. Bale agreed with him. He ordered the archers to attack and prepare their shields. The protagonist noted that the shields gave them an advantage. Tanya expressed hope that they would be able to hold back the onslaught. At that moment, it became clear that the monsters had changed tactics and were using close combat. Sergio, having somehow repelled one enemy, said that it was an unpleasant blow. At that moment, someone shouted for him to be careful. They were attacking him from above. Sergio barely dodged the blow. The protagonist was amazed. Did they start coordinating their actions? Tanya replied that she had told him that these were not demons, but soldiers. If they found some kind of loophole, they would immediately use it. In addition, after a while, they would begin to develop. At the beginning and end of each battle, their behavior is different. The longer the fight lasts, the worse it is for them. The protagonist hoped that the knights with magic weapons would be able to hold out. Tanya continued that they wanted to destroy them before they could respond, which was why they wanted to take him. He chuckled. That's how it was. The girl told him that hunters were more interested in individual achievements than solving mysteries and successful research. It would be difficult to reach the lowest floor. This upset her because she envied the knights. The protagonist asked her if she wanted to become a hunter herself. It was nice to be the first and compete with others, and besides, she was free. She quietly said that he didn't understand and apologized to him. At that moment, Bale appeared next to them and said that the order agreed with the girl. They wanted hunters to unite and work for the good of the country. The protagonist muttered that they had put a lot of effort into choosing a more dangerous career than a knight. He doesn't blame him for wanting glory. Uruka asked him, "Is it useful, right?" The protagonist chuckled and told her that it was. But the knights, he was sure, they would be very helpful in a group fight. After a while, Bale told the warriors to check their equipment and take a rest. Let them call those waiting on the upper floors. When the protagonist and Uruka went to get their comrades on the floor they needed, he noticed that there was a real massacre there. He approached one of the slain lizardmen, noting that he was from the 18th floor. Ash leaned over him, examining something. Then he said that he knew it. He chuckled and added that it was the difference in strength. Uruka asked her mentor what happened. The protagonist showed her a towel and said that it was the thing he used to wipe the blood from the 17th floor. The lizardman's blood there was purple, and here it was red. He became interested in the reason. The girl replied in amazement that it was. Edgar, who suddenly appeared next to them, exclaimed that it was great. They noticed the difference. They called him by name reproachfully, letting him know that he had frightened them with his sudden appearance. Edgar, ignoring their indignation, continued that the blood of the lizardmen on the 17th floor is purple, while on the 18th, it is red. This difference became a topic of discussion at the institute. He asked them what else they knew about demon blood. Uruka assumed that it was harmful to humans, right? He replied that it was. There is a famous story about a hunter who ran out of food in a dungeon and died from eating demon meat. Incidentally, animal experiments also showed similar results. The protagonist said with relief that it was good that the splashes did not affect him. The researcher continued that if a demon's blood got on their skin, they just had to wipe it off thoroughly, and it would be fine. They were nervous, weren't they? He laughed, looking at them. The protagonist told him that in the Empire, they often came into contact with blood when they killed demons that came to the surface. Uruka said that she missed those times. The protagonist asked him if he knew what happened to the demons that died here later. The wizard told him that they would disintegrate, leaving only fur and claws. But the fact that purple pools of blood remained was bad. They were well aware of that. He added that when demons were killed by someone other than humans, they would die a natural death after a month or so. The protagonist noted that this was why they didn't reproduce. Edgar replied that this was typical for demons because they didn't have the ability to reproduce. The protagonist, smiling, replied that everything was clear to him now. Edgar suddenly became serious and said that the lizards here are different. When the sword of the goddess reached the 18th floor, he asked them to find as many lizard bodies as possible. It was surprising, but even after arriving at the lab, they did not rot. Ash clarified, "Is this due to special conditions or the cause of death?" Edgar answered that this is not the case at all. The flesh of dead demons begins to decompose after an hour, and it does not matter whether they are frozen or roasted, but their flesh did not begin to liquefy either after a day or a week. The meat delivered then is still frozen and retains its appearance. The protagonist asked him if he thought the reason was the blood. The wizard answered him that the animals were fed red blood and they did not die. Unlike purple, it is not toxic. In addition, they know that the local lizards have several organs of the same shape as a person. They can replenish their meat supplies during research. It would be a great help on the lower floors, wouldn't it? The protagonist chuckled and said that even without the poison, there were some doubts. Edgar said that replenishing food supplies could be life-threatening and innovative at the same time. Then again, they were going to extract as many bodies as possible and conduct research. Even the smallest detail could lead to solving an important mystery. In research, it was important to carefully examine every element. That was their job. If they made progress little by little, eventually the secret of the dungeon itself and its magic could be revealed. Therefore, he counted on their help as well. The allies assured him that they would do everything required of them. After Edgar left, Uruka asked her mentor what he thought. Did they really need to listen to the wizard's story? The protagonist did not know what to answer her. He thought of Sergio, who would definitely categorically say that he should not be listened to. At this time, the researcher was talking to his assistant. He told him that this time they would be able to conduct a more detailed study. Last time, the destruction was so extensive that nothing could be done. There is a dark zone at the deepest point where demons do not appear. However, it is worth getting to those depths, but their magical technology has advanced greatly, and they have information from last time. They also have the power. Everything will go better this time. The assistant agreed with him. He said that everything looks like that. They teach the lizards as soon as they return to Earth. The researcher noted that he would also like to study various magic stones. The assistant noted that everything will be as Edgar says. At that moment, a scientist ran up to them and asked the wizard to look at one place. He pointed to something that looked like a pile of grass. Edgar took a closer look and replied that these were their huts. Continuing to explore the habitat of the lizards, he saw a workbench, or rather, a stone table. Then he asked the assistant, what about the 18th floor? The man told him that there were no records of it. The researcher continued saying that maybe it was before the humans visited, or they learned by observing. If there were records, they would have known about it. He had also heard that the lizards' memories could progress. He wondered if their knowledge of making weapons and the like was progressing. The assistant suggested that it was possible. The scientist called out to the master again and asked him to come to him. Seeing the basket of provisions that the scientist was pointing to, Edgar asked in surprise, was this their food? The scientist replied that he was also inclined to believe this version. The wizard noticed, their own tails? He asked the scientist, the bodies had tails, didn't they? The scientist replied that he had seen several without tails. He added that he had an idea that the lizards had their own hierarchy and routine. Edgar asked him to continue. The scientist said that there are higher statuses like nobility and lower ones, offering their tails to their superiors as a gift. The ranking system is an interesting idea. It could include concepts like fighting, production, or even work. Edgar muttered that it was very interesting. He asked, what about the 19th floor? He was waiting for it impatiently. At this time, Bale turned to the protagonist, inviting him for a few words. When Ash approached him, his friend handed him a sword. He said that the order was lending it to him for the duration of the research. The protagonist was surprised. A magic sword? Is the 19th floor that difficult? Bale sadly replied that the last group of researchers was almost destroyed there. After all, the Lizard King lives on that floor. The protagonist asked him in confusion, but the research team reached the 20th floor, right? Does that mean the king was defeated? Bale secured the protagonist's promise that what he was about to tell him would remain a secret from everyone. Then, in a near whisper, he told him that in fact the Lizard King had not been defeated. They had escaped from there and descended to the deepest level. That's why they hadn't been able to conduct research. They had to use several people as bait to get out. This information hadn't even been passed on to the Institute. Ash was indignant. How could they have hidden it? Bale replied that the Order and the Institute hadn't gotten along at the time. The protagonist asked him incredulously, was that true? His friend continued that the previous research had been a second project after the first failure. The second city had developed in many ways, developing magical weapons, opening a hunter association. By this time, the attacks had become more frequent. Repeated waves of demons were destroyed by their combined efforts. The protagonist wondered, that's why they were so proud. Bale said that the stability achieved by the cooperation of hunters and the night scientists of that time had been misinterpreted, thinking that it was their merit. That was why they had behaved selfishly, and that was not conducive to unification. That was why they had not gotten along with the Institute, and confidently went to the deepest level. But they had been defeated, and had not really achieved anything. The protagonist thought hard, insufficient research despite the presence of scientists, and also traps. This could not be. Bale noted that after this incident, unrest began in the Order, and the organization was reorganized. Around this time, his family began to live in the second city, and Master Roy headed the Order. Sir Edgar headed the laboratory. The fact that they had known each other since childhood also helped improve their relationship. He had to say that things were starting to go in the right direction. That was why he didn't want to fail this time. He was counting on his friend to help him. Ash assured him that he would fight like always. Bale smiled and remarked that he was looking forward to this spectacle. He asked the MC if after this was over, maybe they could go out to eat somewhere. The protagonist asked him in return if he knew a nice place. His friend replied that he did. With that, they parted ways. The protagonist turned to Iruka and noticed her angry expression. He asked her what was wrong. She asked him if Bale wasn't a girl, right? He was surprised and indignant. What was she even talking about? Iruka replied that if she was a girl, she wouldn't have left her a chance. The protagonist laughed, patted her head, and said that Bale was a man. She had nothing to worry about. She grinned in response and clenched her fists contentedly. He asked her if she was satisfied. The girl asked for a little more of his attention, just that when the battle began, he would immerse himself in it again. In fact, she liked that about him. He thought that she had hit the mark, and out loud told her to pull herself together. Iruka, feeling his hand on her head, was very happy at the moment. The protagonist became serious and said that the 19th floor promises to be difficult. She should be prepared for it. She told him not to worry about it. At that moment, one of the knights on duty came running with an urgent report. He reported that the situation on the 19th floor was very similar to the 18th floor. There were perhaps more than 200 lizardmen with dwellings on the plain, and there is a wooden building, different from the rest. Bale quickly ordered the shield bearers to stand in line. They will begin the same sweep with magic bows. He turned to Edgar and thanked him for permission to use magic. He promised the wizard that they will not let him down. The protagonist joked with his friend, he cannot openly talk about defeat, right? Edgar replied that he believed him and was glad to help them. Roy told Bale to consider the explorer's magic as his last trump card. Sergio added that if they can avoid using it, then it will be glorious. Bale said that he understood them. At this moment, the lookouts shouted that monsters are coming. Cursing, they reported that there are indeed many of them. They brought with them a house of interesting architecture. Bale did not understand what was happening. At this moment, a huge lizard with a weapon came out of the house, and opening his mouth, he roared loudly. The protagonist realized that it was the Lizard King. He looked more like a dragon than a lizard. The protagonist wondered if the others had met him. Did they feel the same? He smiled, anticipating an exciting battle. Iruka noticed her mentor's mood. He was smiling again. The protagonist was embarrassed, cursing. He said that he himself did not notice it. He thanked the girl for her attention. She smiled and replied that it was okay. She even liked it. The Demon King jumped to the ground and took a fighting stance. His squad stood next to their boss. The protagonist and his allies stood in front of the opponents. They were full of determination. The protagonist called his squad to attack. They needed to reduce the number of enemies. They attacked them with their magic weapons, destroying them one by one. The protagonist noted that their magic did not work on the Lizard King. If they destroy all the others, then they will reduce the pressure. He called out to Bale and asked him to look at the situation with the king. No magic weapon affected him. He did not even let anyone get close to him, easily repelling all blows. Making another attack, he terrifyingly pounced in a jump, and his blows shook the earth. Archers and shield bearers were forced to simply repel the attacks of monsters. Bale ordered them to maintain formation and called the spearmen to battle. He told them not to stand still, but to attack. The warriors rushed to attack, but the king of monsters released blazing flames from his mouth. Bale shouted to the main attacker to take care of himself, but it was too late. The warrior howled for help. He was engulfed in flames. He was burning. The monsters were advancing in a dense formation on the knights. The protagonist cursed. This was too dense an onslaught. Iruka shouted at him that she couldn't shoot. The knights were in the line of fire. He frantically began to think what to do. The sword of the goddess might not reach him either. What else could he do? At that moment, Tanya appeared with her squad and shouted that they needed to take the perimeter first. The protagonist shouted at Iruka that they would leave the king to the knights. Priority should be given to those who spit fire. They needed to strike from the rear. She answered him that she understood him. They rushed to attack from the rear, crushing the opponents left and right. Stopping, he assessed the situation and noticed that they had almost succeeded. This should have reduced the onslaught. He wondered, what about the knights? At that time, Bale was giving the warriors the order not to push the opponents. They had better dodge. At that second, the king of monsters caught himself, swung, and dealt a terrifying blow to Bale. The protagonist called his name in alarm, but the boy lay motionless. Tanya told him to take care of his friend. There were enough people here for a fight. He answered her that he understood her. He began to think feverishly again, what to do. With simple lizards, everything would be simple. But the king complicated everything. It was impossible to scatter. Then an idea came to him. He decided to get his attention himself. The protagonist turned to Iruka and asked her to shoot all the remaining explosive arrows into the king. The girl immediately fulfilled his request. The enraged king, wildly rolling his eyes, began to turn towards the protagonist. He gripped his weapon tighter and, shouting that the king was about to get what was his, rushed to attack him. He thrust his spear into the monster's back and exclaimed, like this. Seeing the wild expression in the monster's eyes, the protagonist said maliciously, "That was painful, right?" Now he intended to stab his opponent in the neck. He pulled the magic sword out of its sheath, gripped it tighter, and waited for the right moment. Seeing the king about to attack him in a jump, he rejoiced. It was great. He was going straight for him, as if on cue. Having waited for the right moment, he struck the enemy. But his sword bounced off the enemy's body like a ball. The protagonist noted that even the sword couldn't take him. The enemy struck back, but Ash was able to dodge it, noting that it was a powerful blow. If it had hit him, it would have been the end of him, and yet he didn't have time to dodge the king's next blow, from which he flew off and fell. At that moment, Iruka called out to her mentor in alarm, and the monster threateningly raised his weapon over his head, intending to finish off the protagonist. The protagonist jumped to his feet and shouted at the king not to turn away. Ash struck him, but again, it didn't work. His scales were so hard they couldn't be pierced. If only they could do something about it. At that moment, he heard Edgar's voice, who shouted at him to step aside. The protagonist saw the fireball sent by the researcher at the enemy and realized that he had used his magic. Watching the king melt in the fire, Ash thought in admiration, "What a blow! Even scales can't cope with fire." It was great power. However, the protagonist noticed that the demon king never fell. Edgar swayed and fell to his knees. He said sadly that he couldn't kill him. Sergio called out to his boss in alarm, noting his weak state. At that moment, the monster opened its mouth and let out a crushing roar, preparing to belch out another portion of flame. Roy shouted at Edgar to step back. Coughing up blood, Roy thought, "Not now." The monster, having assessed the situation, decided to retreat. The protagonist noticed this and shouted that he would not let him get away. Chasing after the monster, he thought that this was a great chance. He stabbed him in the back. The king turned sharply and hit him. Falling, the protagonist, full of determination, shouted, "No, he will not give up." He gripped his sword tighter. Waiting for the monster to get closer to him to strike again, he jumped to his feet and attacked it with his magic sword from behind. But this unkillable brute quickly turned again and hit the protagonist. Turning away to run, the monster unknowingly exposed its limb to the blow, which the protagonist took advantage of. Ash dealt him a strong blow to the arm, but his sword got stuck in the thick skin of the monster. The king roared and began to twitch his body. The protagonist, without letting go of the sword, was dangling in the air in all directions. At that moment, Bale arrived. He shouted to his friend to let go of the sword. The protagonist let go of the weapon and fell to the ground. Bale asked him if he was okay. Then Iruka came running, shouting that she would help them. Ash shouted to his allies that the king's arm was injured. He thought regretfully, if only he could strike again. Bale managed to strike the monster in the injured arm. The protagonist noticed that his arm had fallen off. Now there was no time to waste. He thought despairingly, if only he had a weapon. At that moment, Roy called out to him, handed him a sword and told him to use it. The protagonist said with admiration that it was a magic wind sword. This weapon was intended exclusively for the knight commander. With it, he would definitely deal with this terrible king. He rushed to attack and struck the monster with his strongest blow. Ash thought in surprise. Was he still not falling? But he noticed that the demon was supporting its body with its tail. It easily adapted to the circumstances. Even such a sword did not defeat him. Truly, he is the king of the lizards. The protagonist thought, what if he hit the enemy with the hilt? But even so, The demon was able to defend himself. The protagonist exclaimed. He did not even know how to surprise him. Uruka admired her mentor. The others watched the battle with anxiety. Ash realized the tail. Here it was, the king's weak spot. He thought that now it would all be over. The protagonist twisted and struck the enemy on the tail, and then chopped off his head. Everyone present could not believe it. He did it. They did it. The Lizard King fell. It was their victory. Ash, not fully believing in a successful outcome, said, "Did he succeed?" Uruka, with a joyful cry, rushed at her mentor and hugged him, hanging on him. She exclaimed how great he was. She loved him so much. In the end, she could not resist him in battle. The protagonist shook her off and thanked her. She had also helped a lot. She laughed happily and asked him to praise her more often. Bale came up to them and asked them how they were doing here. The protagonist thanked him for the help he had given him. Bale objected. It was them he thanked. He still couldn't believe they had done it. The protagonist confessed to his friend that he had just gotten a huge rush of pleasure. Tanya, who had come up to them, asked the protagonist, was it really true? He was embarrassed, wanted to say something in his defense, but Tanya interrupted him. She said, let him then accept her compliment with dignity. He was a man she respected. Uruka tensed up and hissed angrily. How mean she was. Tanya laughed and told her not to be angry. She would also acknowledge her contribution. The girl irritably answered her that she hadn't meant it that way. The protagonist, chuckling, told her to stop being angry already. Then he thanked everyone present, clenched his hand into a fist, put it forward, and asked his allies, a fist? They first looked at him in bewilderment. Then Tanya noted that this was a good idea. All four of them bumped fists. The protagonist saw Roy. He called out to him. When he approached the commander, he thanked him. Thanks to him, he was able to win. He carefully handed him the sword that Roy had given him during the battle. The man addressed him by name and said that his blow was magnificent. The protagonist bowed to him and said that it was a great honor to hear words of praise from such a great man. Roy told him to stop bowing and thanking him. He added that he was already old, and this time at the decisive moment he was unable to act. The protagonist apologized for his question, but still asked him, is he ill with something? Roy replied that his heart sometimes doesn't listen to him. He returned to the topic of the fight, and once again praised the protagonist. It was a great fight. When they returned, he would give him the recognition and reward he deserved. Ash was embarrassed and thanked him. Then, he added that Master Edgar's great magic also helped. Roy replied that even in this case, he was up against a formidable opponent, and he did it. He was a good boy. Roy patted him on the shoulder. The man continued that he can be proud of how he mastered the sword. That's what knights should be like. Ash, shocked by his words, bowed to him again and thanked him profusely. At that moment, the protagonist was called by Uruka. Roy smiled and told him that he could go. The protagonist apologized to him and ran to the girl. He told her that, come to think of it, the arrow bounced back from Roy then. The girl admitted that it was all strange. The protagonist told her that everything was fine. He apologized to him properly. Roy, watching them, remarked, ah, youth. Edgar, who came up from behind, asked him if he was jealous. Roy turned to him and said that they both had aged. The researcher said that Ash resembled Roy in his youth. He turned to his friend and reminded that he, too, often laughed while fighting monsters. Roy answered that the stronger the opponent, the greater the recoil. This just shows how good his skills are. He is too skilled to be a simple hunter. Edgar was surprised, right? And what would his assessment be? Roy said that the protagonist is true to the basics, but his ability to read the situation is especially good due to his combat experience, and he is not used to retreating even in the face of a strong opponent. Even with the latest technology, he would like the young knights to learn from his example. Bale, who approached them, asked Roy if he liked the protagonist. The man asked the boy if he could tell where Ash was from. Bale smiled and told him that his friend was a former Imperial Knight. He had once told them that he had a great opponent in a friendly match. Roy guessed that he had meant him then. Bale continued that, apparently, the Empire treated him poorly. Edgar noted that the Imperial aristocracy would finish off anyone. Roy forced a laugh and said that thanks to this, their country had acquired a valuable fighting unit. If he was in their ranks, they would have many glorious victories. Bale, also laughing, told him that they were already working on it. Roy looked at him questioningly. The boy explained to him that they could not afford to have all the talented people gravitate towards the central government. And given Ash's situation, he did not think that his friend would want to join the aristocratic community just yet. Roy noted that it was clear. They would hand over the matter to the Barone family. However, they will provide an appropriate reward. Bale said that as he saw, they do not give up. What would they do if there was a failure? Roy thought and answered that then, he would be adopted by his family, and then they would enroll him in the knightly order. Bale was surprised. Would he go that far? The commander said that Ash was indeed valuable. He understood the importance of maintaining the balance of power, and he was not going to force him to do anything. However, if he avoided democracy, then he would not be able to avoid the orders of the state. Eventually, his name would reach the ears of the higher ranks and Her Majesty. Bale wanted to say something, but Roy continued. When that happens, he will need someone to protect him. Even the Barone family cannot interfere in the affairs of the Queen, right? But at least it is within their power. The commander was silent for a moment and offered Bale to cooperate. For his part, he promised that his family would deal with the Queen's antics, and in return, he would like Ash to become a noble and join them. Bale bowed before him in a polite bow and said that he understood him. The guy added that if it was the protagonist's own decision, he would not interfere. Roy noted that he would respect his wish. He only wanted to see how high a person with such power could rise. It was extremely curious. He would not allow petty noble disputes over spheres of influence to destroy such a person. Bale bowed to him again and thanked him. Edgar agreed that Ash was a real diamond, and a very rare one at that. Bale agreed with him. He thought about his friend, like, it seems that even greater trials await him in the future. At that moment, the protagonist sneezed. Ruka anxiously asked him how he was. MC answered her that he was fine. He wondered why this sneeze appeared. Ash was a man whose fate was being decided at that moment without his knowledge. When the scientist examined him, he said that he did not have a cold, only a few injuries. The protagonist agreed with him. It was in vain that he let Uruka persuade him, but she was so insistent that she wanted to help him. He should check with a doctor. The scientist was surprised that he did not have problems with monsters. The protagonist was surprised. What was he talking about? The thing is, Roy, before the battle, gave the scientist a bottle of potion and told him to give this potion to the protagonist, just in case. Ash thanked him. Roy noted that this is the result of an important national study. Let him not pay attention. The protagonist agreed with him. Roy asked him for permission to get down to business. He heard that Ash does not like aristocrats very much. MC told him that he had some difficulties with them in the past. The commander noted that the nobility is a complicated thing. Ash asked him if everything was the same in the kingdom. Roy said that it was not as aristocratic as the Empire, but there were still connections between the families. He understood his dislike, but he tried to keep them away. It was only a matter of time before the nobility or the Queen learned of his exploits. The protagonist protested. He was just a hunter. The man pointed out that this investigation was conducted by order of Her Majesty. If he reported this, the Queen would find out, and given his talents and strength, she liked to hear everything firsthand. So it was better to send her a report. She could invite him to the capital. Then the nobles would learn that he was the Queen's favorite, and some would try to use this to their advantage. The protagonist sighed heavily. The commander wanted to know from him, did he want to become a noble? Or did he want to live as a hunter until his death? But whatever he chose, he, the commander, would support him. Ash thought about it. There was something to think about. Then he replied that he had a girlfriend he wanted to be with, so he couldn't marry a noblewoman. Roy noted ironically, even if the kingdom was polygamous. The protagonist firmly replied that it was. He wouldn't marry without love, and took a sip of his drink. Roy asked him then how he felt about having a new family name. The protagonist replied that he should think about it. After all, he wanted to live and die with a sword in his hands. That was quite to his liking. Roy understood him. He was familiar with this feeling. He said that he would try to take his wishes into account. The man poured a new portion of the drink from the flask. The protagonist asked him if he was sure. Roy noted that they wanted him to make a long and successful career in their kingdom. But if it was Her Highness's order, even he would not be able to stop him. Ash replied that he understood. The commander handed him his blade, saying that he was giving it to him as a gift. He added that the seal on the blade was the Orano family crest as proof of his patronage. The protagonist was already under the protection of the Barone Counts, and this would be an additional boost. The protagonist accepted his expensive gift with trembling hands and thanked him wholeheartedly. Roy noted that he was now under the protection of his family. As soon as they finished their research, they would move on to the 20th floor. MC put his hand to his chest and assured the man that he would try to live up to his expectations. At that moment, Sergio turned to Edgar and said that his help was needed. The researcher asked him what was going on. The guy dug up one of the grass piles and asked him to take a look. There were eggs under the grass pile. The wizard was surprised. Lizard eggs? Is that how they reproduce? Sergio said that it was generally accepted that demons do not reproduce, that the dungeon creates them. That's why the number of demons is stable, even if they are hunted in large numbers every day. What about their physique? He noted that lizards have organs similar to humans. Reproduction is theoretically possible. Edgar thoughtfully said that lizards have blood of a different color. Come to think of it, the color of the magic stone of the lizards here is different from others. It does not change even if you shine a light on it or crush it. Sergio exclaimed that this is a historical event. After all, the lizards here are special. Edgar cooled his ardor. He was getting ahead of himself. Nothing has been proven yet. Did he understand? They will be happy when they return and have proof. The researcher told his assistants not to forget to collect eggs for research. Then he looked at the monster's dwelling and said that a king lived here. Looking inside, he noticed that this is, indeed, the dwelling of an important lizard. One of the assistants, sorting through the monster's things, said that there were many personal items here. And there were also human bones. The scientist shuddered, horror. He noted that the bones were smooth. This intrigued him. Were they polished? Then he discovered weapons. There were various spears, swords, blades, and knives. The scientist noted that he had asked the knights what kind of weapons they were. Now he was almost sure that this was the equipment from the last study. Edgar muttered that everything was clear to him. They copied something for their weapons. He took a stone sword and said that making a sword from stone was difficult. The scientist asked him if this meant that those who had swords and not stone spears were the best or the chosen ones. The researcher thought about it, the hierarchy, from the highest to the lowest. He continued that they would talk to the knights later about how strong they were when they fought. Right now, they needed to go to the 20th floor. He ordered his assistants to report to the knights when they had a clear idea. The entire team headed to the 20th floor. The protagonist was focused. He told Iruka to be careful. Bale was worried about them. He hoped they both at least got some rest. Ash thanked him for his concern and replied that they were fine. He called his friend away for a few words. When Bale approached him, the protagonist showed him the blade and told him that he received it from the commander. There was a crest on the blade. Bale noticed to himself. He was fast. He told the protagonist that any item with a crest had a special meaning. His family will have something for him too when they return. He added that Ash should feel free to use any of them if he needed something. The protagonist was not sure that he would get the result he wanted without it. Bale smiled at him and remarked that they just needed him to continue working as hard as before. After a while he spoke. Here they come. Let them watch their step. There needed to be light here. It was so dark. He ordered his assistants to give each member of the expedition a light source. The scientists would begin an investigation after they improved the lighting. Let everyone be on the alert. His orders were short and succinct. The protagonist looked around as much as he could and thought that it looked like a room, especially since it was so deep. There wasn't even a light source. He noticed some kind of structure and wondered what it was. Shining a light on it, he said in surprise, "A bench?" Iruka noticed that there was a metal plate hanging above the bench. The protagonist answered her that it was. He brought the lantern closer. There was something written on the plate. But what could it be? Iruka said that it didn't look like continental writing. The protagonist was surprised that it was more of a pattern than letters. A scholar named Albadin approached them and said that it was an ancient letter. He was very curious about it. The protagonist asked him, was it an ancient letter? From the times when gods and messengers lived together? The scholar answered that it was exactly like that. It was the era of gods, so the letter was ancient. He added that God was not quite the right word. There was an ancient civilization back then. Gods and messengers created the world, and then something happened and everyone disappeared. He added that it was believed that the ruins and dungeons were left by them from that time. Iruka asked him what the letters meant. Albadin answered that it had yet to be solved, like the secrets of the dungeon. The civilization of gods must have been much more advanced than it is now. The protagonist thought that they were practically standing on the remains of another world. How romantic. The scholar asked them, do they like ancient stories and fairy tales, right? He immediately stopped himself and apologized to them for his talkativeness. He noticed that sometimes he couldn't be stopped. True, he became a scientist because of legends. Maybe there really are worlds from fairy tales, he thought so. At that moment, one of the scientists called him. He apologized to his allies. He had to go. When he went, something crunched under his feet. Suddenly, the floor collapsed under him. The protagonist rushed to save him. He managed to grab him, but did not have time to throw him to a safe place, and they both fell down. The scientists began to call their comrade by name. Iruka called out to her mentor in alarm. The protagonist softened the blow to the scientist. He asked him, is he injured? The scientist began to slide off him, apologizing to him for this. Bale shouted to them from above, are they okay? Let them wait a little, they will help them now. The protagonist answered, okay, they will wait. The scientist began to look around and noticed that there was something there. Ash warned him to stay put. The protagonist looked around and was very surprised by what he saw. What kind of small room was this? There were no signs of demons. There were electrical boxes hanging on the walls and cabinets with strange automation on the floor. Albadin crouched in front of one of the devices and said in amazement, This can't be. Then he asked to call the boss. What he found could be a relic. Edgar was interested from above. What did he say? He would go down to him right away. Sergio was indignant. It was too dangerous. The protagonist chuckled at them. It seemed like nothing was changing. He climbed outside. Iruka worriedly asked her mentor, was he sure he was okay? Ash told her not to worry. Nothing hurt anymore. He added that he would now take the potion and drink it. The girl was indignant. Why didn't he do it right away? Ash couldn't find what to answer her. Bale noted that apparently he wasn't hurt. He asked his friend, and what is it like down there? The protagonist answered his friend that it looked like a small room down there. It was small but elongated, and there were no signs of demons in it. Bale replied that according to Mr. Edgar, this was quite a big find. Ash suggested that maybe they could solve the mystery of the dungeon. His friend replied that he didn't even know. Suddenly, an incomprehensible wave rose from the floor, and the aura around changed. Everyone was alarmed. What was that? Maybe it was demons attacking? At that moment, something cracked, and suddenly the room was filled with bright light. Built-in lighting lamps on the ceiling lit up. Everyone looked up in shock.